Arlington National Cemetery, 2005. The morning air hung heavy with memory. Rows of white headstones stretched across the rolling green hills like silent sentinels, each one marking a life given in service to country. Colonel James Iron Steele stood motionless before a particular marker, his weathered hand resting on the smooth stone. 30 years had passed since the fall of Saigon, but time had not diminished the weight of what was lost. Steele was a tall man, still straight-backed at 65, with silver hair cropped in the same military cut he had worn for over 4 decades. His face, lined by years of command decisions and desert sun, remained impassive as he placed a single white rose on the grave of Captain Robert Dawson. "You were right, old friend," Steele whispered. "The gun makes all the difference." The memories came unbidden. The jungle heat, the radio crackling with desperate coordinates, the sickening black smoke as Dawson's tank erupted into flame, its 90mm cannon outranged and outmatched by the Soviet T-54. If only they had possessed the firepower Steele had been advocating for years before. A discreet cough broke his reverie. A young man in his 30s approached, digital recorder in hand, notebook tucked under his arm. Michael Reeves from American Military Monthly. The reporter Steele had finally agreed to speak with after decades of declining interviews. "Colonel Steele," Reeves extended his hand. "Thank you for meeting me here." Steele's grip was firm, his eyes evaluating. This seemed the appropriate place to tell this story. These men are part of it. Reeves glanced at the headstone. "Captain Robert Dawson, he served with you in Vietnam. 3rd Battalion, 77th Armor, one of the finest tank commanders I ever knew." Steele's voice remained steady, but his eyes betrayed the cost of those memories. His patent took a direct hit from a T-54. The Soviet tank was positioned beyond the effective range of our main gun. We couldn't touch him, but he could reach us. "That's what led to your work on the Abrams, isn't it?" Reeves asked. Steele looked out across the cemetery, where generations of American soldiers rested. "That's a simplified version of a complicated story. One that begins long before Vietnam with a forgotten cannon from another war entirely." He gestured toward a nearby bench. "You wanted to know how the M1 Abrams became America's battle tank. The real story hasn't been told. It's about men who refuse to let politics override the protection of American soldiers. It's about learning from history's buried lessons." As they sat, Steele turned the reporter's recorder on himself. "Most people think the story starts with the failed MBT-70 project in the 70s. They're wrong. The true beginning was in Germany, 1968, when American tanks faced a sobering reality check. Schweinfurt, West Germany, 1968. Captain James Steele stood in the commander's hatch of his M48A3 Patton tank, binoculars trained on the tree line 1,500 meters ahead. The autumn air was crisp, the morning fog just beginning to lift from the rolling German countryside. 3rd Armored Brigade was conducting NATO war games, and Steele's tank company was tasked with stopping a simulated Soviet advance. "Target identified, T-62, bearing 035, range 1,600 meters, Steele called down to his gunner, Sergeant Paul Jenkins. "Too far, Captain," Jenkins responded, his eye pressed to the gunner's sight. "We need to close to 1,200 for a guaranteed hit." "That's the problem, isn't it? They can hit us from where they stand." Steele lowered his binoculars. "Driver, advance to that ridgeline, 10 o'clock. Keep us hull down." The Patton's 750 horsepower Continental engine roared as the 50-ton machine lurched forward, its treads churning the soft earth. Steele kept his eyes fixed on the opposing force. British Centurion tanks standing in for Soviet armor. This was just an exercise, but the lessons would be written in blood if ignored in actual combat. The tank crested the ridge, exposing only its turret. Jenkins laid the gun on target and fired. A blank round signaled the shot. The exercise observer raised a red flag. Miss. The opposition immediately fired back. The observer raised a green flag and pointed at Steele's tank. "Kill shot." "Damn it," Steele muttered. In a real engagement, he and his crew would now be dead or burning. Later that evening in the Tactical Operations Center, Lieutenant Colonel Frank Morrison dropped a stack of after-action reports on the table. "We lost 17 tanks today. They lost 5. Those are unacceptable numbers, gentlemen." The gathered company commanders nodded soberly. The war game had exposed critical vulnerabilities in American armor doctrine and equipment. The T-62's 150 smoothbore can engage effectively at ranges our 90mm cannot match, Morrison continued. "In a real shooting war along the Fulda Gap, we'd be at a significant disadvantage. Steele spoke up. Sir, the problem isn't just range, it's penetration capability. Our rounds aren't defeating their armor consistently, even within effective range. Morrison fixed Steele with a measuring gaze. You've been reading up on Soviet armor capabilities again, Captain. Yes, sir, and not just Soviet. I've been studying historical data on tank engagements stretching back to World War II. There are lessons we failed to incorporate. After the briefing, Morrison pulled Steele aside. You've got something specific in mind, don't you, James? Steele hesitated, then reached into his field desk and pulled out a worn folder filled with handwritten notes and diagrams. I've been compiling this for nearly 3 years, sir. It's an analysis of various tank gun designs, focusing on muzzle velocity, barrel pressure management, and penetration characteristics. Morrison leafed through the meticulously documented pages. This is impressive work, Steele. Some of these guns I've never even heard of. Most people haven't, sir. This one in particular. Steele pointed to a detailed drawing. The Italian Cannone da 7532, Modello 1937. It was developed before World War II, but production delays meant it was barely fielded before Italy surrendered. What's special about it? Its recoil system and breech design were revolutionary for the time. They allowed a relatively small platform to handle tremendous muzzle pressures, which translated to exceptional range and penetration. The Italians mounted it on a carriage originally designed for a short-barreled howitzer. With modern metallurgy and design principles, the same concept could transform our tank guns. Morrison closed the folder. You're talking about a complete redesign of our main battle tank's primary weapon system. I'm talking about saving American lives, sir. The Soviets have already made the leap to smoothbore high-velocity guns. We're falling behind. Morrison considered this for a long moment. Write it up, Captain. Full report, specifications, historical precedents, everything. I know people at the Pentagon who might actually read it. Steele returned to his quarters and worked through the night. This wasn't just an academic exercise. Every engagement in Vietnam was proving that American armor doctrine needed updating. While the Patton tanks weren't facing Soviet T-62s in Southeast Asia, the principles of firepower and protection remained constant. By dawn, Steele had completed a comprehensive 46-page report titled Lessons Unlearned: Historical Tank Gun Design and Applications for Modern Warfare. The centerpiece was his analysis of the forgotten Italian cannon and how its principles could revolutionize American tank design. 3 weeks later, Steele received unexpected orders. He was being temporarily reassigned to the Pentagon, Department of the Army, Weapons Systems Evaluation Group, effective immediately. Pentagon, Arlington, Virginia, 1969. The Pentagon's endless corridors and identical doors made navigation a challenge for newcomers. Steele, however, moved with purpose. 2 months into his assignment, he had learned to traverse the labyrinthine building efficiently. Today, he had been summoned to a section of the building he hadn't visited before, a wing housing special projects. A stone-faced MP checked his credentials before allowing him through a security door marked classified, authorized personnel only. Inside, Steele found himself in a conference room where 3 men and 1 woman were already seated. He recognized only one, General William Bull Harrison, a legendary armor officer who had commanded tank battalions under Patton in World War II. Captain Steele, right on time. Harrison rose and extended his hand. Your reputation for punctuality precedes you. Thank you, sir, Steele replied, taking in the others at the table. Their lack of uniforms suggested civilian status, but their bearing hinted at military backgrounds. Harrison gestured to the empty chair. Have a seat, son. We've got a lot to discuss and not much time to do it. As Steele sat, Harrison introduced the others. This is Dr. Eleanor Morgan, our chief ballistics engineer. Colonel Victor Chambers, program manager for advanced combat systems, and Mr. Alan Crawford from DARPA. Dr. Morgan nodded professionally. She appeared to be in her early 40s with intelligent eyes that evaluated Steele carefully. Chambers offered a perfunctory handshake, his expression guarded. Crawford simply inclined his head slightly. Harrison didn't waste time on pleasantries. Captain, your report on historical tank gun design landed on my desk 2 months ago. It's the reason you're here today. Steele maintained his composure, but his pulse quickened. I'm glad it found its way to you, sir. It found its way to several interested parties, Harrison replied, his weathered face unreadable. Some were impressed. Others were disturbed by your conclusions. Chambers leaned forward, Captain, you essentially accuse the Army's entire weapons development apparatus of ignoring critical historical lessons. That ruffled some feathers. With respect, sir, that wasn't my intention, Steele replied evenly. I merely identified patterns in weapons development that suggest we might be overlooking valuable precedents. Like your Italian cannon, De Morgan interjected. Her voice carried a slight Boston accent. The Cannone de 7532, an interesting case study. Harrison slid a folder across the table. What you're about to see is classified top secret, the MBT-70 project. Steele opened the folder to find technical specifications for an advanced main battle tank being jointly developed by the United States and West Germany. The proposed vehicle featured a sophisticated hydropneumatic suspension, an autoloader for its main gun, and a host of other cutting-edge systems. Impressive, Steele remarked, studying the design. It's also 3 years behind schedule and projected to cost 4 times the original budget, Harrison stated flatly. The Germans are threatening to pull out. Congress is asking hard questions about cost overruns. Chambers cleared his throat. The technological challenges are substantial but not insurmountable. We're making progress. At what cost? Harrison countered. Each tank is projected to cost over $1 million. That's unsustainable. Crawford spoke for the first time. The question becomes whether we can achieve the same capability improvements through a more economical approach. All eyes turned to Steele. Harrison's gaze was particularly penetrating. That's where you come in, Captain. Your report suggests an alternative path, one based on proven historical principles rather than pushing every technological boundary simultaneously. Steele carefully considered his next words. Sir, I believe the fundamental principles demonstrated by the Cannone de 7532 could be applied to modern tank gun design. The Italians achieved remarkable performance by mounting a long-barreled cannon on an existing carriage, using an innovative recoil system to manage the increased forces. Dr. Morgan nodded. The basic concept is sound. Longer barrel length, improved breech design, modernized recoil management, all potentially achievable without the complex autoloader system currently giving us headaches in the MBT-70. The MBT-70 is the future of American armor, Chambers insisted. These historical curiosities are interesting academic exercises, but hardly the basis for modern weapons development. Tell that to the Soviets, Steele countered. Their T-62's 115 cm smoothbore is based on principles refined from German World War II designs. They've already made the leap we're still contemplating. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Harrison finally broke it. Captain Steele, I'm assigning you to a special advisory role on the MBT-70 project. Your specific focus will be alternative gun design concepts based on your historical research. He held up a hand as Chambers began to protest. This isn't replacing anything, Colonel. It's providing options if the current approach continues to face challenges. After the meeting adjourned, Dr. Morgan caught up with Steele in the corridor. That was interesting, she said, falling into step beside him. You managed to challenge an entire weapons development philosophy without actually picking a fight. Steele glanced at her. I'm not interested in bureaucratic battles, Doctor. I'm interested in giving our tank crews the best possible equipment. Eleanor, she corrected. And I appreciate that perspective. Most of the military men I work with are more concerned with advancing their careers than advancing our capabilities. They paused at a junction in the hallway. Your report was thorough, she continued, but I'd like to hear more about this Italian cannon. Most of the documentation was lost or destroyed after the war. How did you piece together such detailed information? Research, interviews with veterans, some technical documents recovered by intelligence units after the Italians' surrender. Steele hesitated. And personal interest. My father was involved in weapons development after World War II. He left behind some notes on captured Axis equipment. Eleanor's eyes lit with interest. I'd like to see those notes sometime if possible. We might find something overlooked. I'll see what I can do, Steele replied noncommittally. As they parted ways, Steele couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just stepped into a much larger battle than he had anticipated. The stakes were no longer theoretical. His ideas were now attached to his name, his reputation, and potentially the lives of future American tankers. Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, 1969. The firing range stretched before them, target silhouettes positioned at various distances from 500 to 3,000 meters. Steele stood behind a concrete observation bunker alongside Eleanor Morgan and several engineers as a modified M60 tank took position at the firing line. This is the current production model 105mm gun, Eleanor explained, handing Steele a set of binoculars. Watch the recoil characteristics carefully. The tank fired. Its main gun belched flame and recoiled sharply. Downrange, the shell impacted slightly off-center on the 1,500-meter target. Acceptable accuracy, but the barrel life is limited to approximately 700 rounds before replacement is necessary, Eleanor noted. The recoil stresses the entire turret system significantly. They observed several more test firings before moving to an indoor facility where various gun components were displayed on workbenches. The MBT-70's proposed system, Eleanor gestured to a complex assembly featuring an autoloader mechanism. It's designed around the XM150 152mm gun launcher, capable of firing conventional rounds in the Shillelagh missile. Steele examined the mechanism carefully. Complicated, multiple failure points. How has reliability testing gone? A technician nearby snorted before quickly composing himself. Eleanor's expression confirmed Steele's suspicions. We've had challenges, she admitted. The autoloader jams under certain conditions, particularly at non-optimal gun elevations. Steele moved along the displays until he reached a table with technical drawings. These are from my report, he realized, recognizing his own hand-drawn diagrams of the Canone de 7532. Yes, Eleanor confirmed. I had the team recreate your concepts using CAD. We've been analyzing the breech and recoil mechanisms. The technical drawings had been elaborated upon, with detailed specifications and stress analyses. Your initial assessment appears correct, Eleanor continued. The Italians developed a remarkably efficient recoil management system for their era. With modern materials and manufacturing techniques, the principles could yield significant improvements. Have you run simulations? Steele asked. Better than that, Eleanor led him through a security door into another section of the facility. We built a prototype. In a test bay stood a hybrid creation, the recoil system and breech mechanism based on the Canone de 7532 design, scaled up and modernized, mounted to a modified M60 gun cradle. It's not complete yet, Eleanor cautioned. This is just a proof of concept to test the recoil dynamics and pressure management. Steele approached the prototype reverently. His theoretical exercise had taken physical form. When can we test it? That's the problem, Eleanor's voice lowered. Colonel Chambers has frozen funding for unauthorized prototypes. This work has been proceeding under the radar, using discretionary research funds. Steele's expression darkened. Politics. Always, Eleanor agreed. The MBT-70 is the official future of American armor. Alternatives threaten both its funding and the reputation staked on its success. Their conversation was interrupted by a young lieutenant entering the room. Dr. Morgan, there's a call for you from General Harrison's office. Eleanor excused herself, leaving Steele alone with the prototype. He ran his hand along the modified breech, recognizing elements from the Italian design merged with modern components. The past and present coming together to forge the future. A voice behind him broke his contemplation. Quite the historical enthusiast, aren't you, Captain? Colonel Chambers stood in the doorway, his posture rigid with barely contained hostility. Colonel, Steele acknowledged with appropriate respect, I was just examining Dr. Morgan's prototype implementation of some historical design principles. Yes, I can see that. Chambers approached, his gaze critical. Unauthorized prototypes consuming resources that should be dedicated to the MBT-70 program. With respect, sir, exploring alternatives seems prudent given the challenges the primary program is facing. Chambers' jaw tightened. The MBT-70 represents the cutting edge of armored warfare technology. Every great advancement faces obstacles during development. I don't disagree, sir. But history teaches us that sometimes the most effective solutions combine proven principles with new technology, rather than attempting to revolutionize every component simultaneously. History, Chambers repeated, the word dripping with disdain. You know what else history teaches us, Captain? That careers are made or broken based on which horse you back. General Harrison may find your historical perspectives charming, but the future of American armor will be decided by forward-thinking leaders, not historians. The threat was thinly veiled. Steele maintained his composure. My only interest is ensuring American tank crews have the best possible equipment, sir. A noble sentiment, Chambers replied, his tone suggesting otherwise. But remember, Captain, this is Washington. Noble sentiments take a back seat to political reality. With that, he departed, leaving Steele alone with the prototype. The encounter had made one thing abundantly clear. Steele had made a powerful enemy. Pentagon, Arlington, Virginia, 1969. The classified briefing room hummed with tension. Around the conference table sat General Harrison, Colonel Chambers, Dr. Morgan, and representatives from the Department of Defense and Congressional Appropriations Committees. Steele stood at the front, concluding his presentation. In summary, gentlemen, the historical precedent of the Canone Day 7532 demonstrates that significant performance improvements can be achieved through targeted innovations in existing platforms. Our preliminary tests indicate that applying these principles to the M60 tank could yield a 30% increase in effective range and penetration capability at approximately one-fifth the development cost of the current MBT-70 approach. Steele clicked to his final slide showing a comparative cost analysis. The numbers spoke for themselves. Harrison nodded appreciatively. The congressional representatives leaned forward, their interest piqued by the potential budget savings. Chambers remained stone-faced. "Thank you, Captain Steele," Harrison said, taking control of the meeting. "Dr. Morgan, would you care to add your technical assessment?" Eleanor rose, her professional demeanor masking the excitement Steele knew she felt about their prototype's promising test results. "Our engineering team has validated Captain Steele's core thesis," she began. "The recoil management system adapted from the Italian design allows for significantly higher muzzle velocities without exceeding the structural limitations of the existing turret system. The modified breech improves both loading speed and safety margins. Most importantly, these improvements can be implemented as upgrades to our existing tank fleet rather than requiring an entirely new platform." One of the congressional representatives, a silver-haired man with penetrating eyes, addressed a question to Chambers. "Colonel, given these findings, what is your assessment of this alternative approach?" Chambers straightened in his chair. "While Captain Steele's historical research is academically interesting, it represents a fundamentally backward-looking approach to armored warfare. The MBT-70 program, despite its development challenges, remains our best path forward for maintaining technological superiority over Soviet armor. At 4 times the projected cost," the congressman pointed out, "and 3 years behind schedule according to this morning's GAO report. Advanced technology requires investment," Chambers countered smoothly. "The question we should be asking is whether we want the world's most advanced battle tank or a marginally improved version of an obsolete design." The discussion continued in this vein, with Chambers defending the MBT-70 program while subtly dismissing Steele's alternative approach as regressive thinking. When the meeting concluded, the congressional representatives departed without clear indication of their leanings. Harrison lingered, speaking quietly with Steele and Eleanor. "You made an impression, Captain. Congressman Whitmore in particular seemed intrigued by your historical precedent argument." "Chambers was ready for us," Steele observed. He framed the entire discussion as innovation versus tradition. "Politics," Harrison sighed. "The real battle isn't on any firing range or proving ground. It's right here in these meeting rooms." Eleanor gathered her materials. "The prototype test results speak for themselves. If we can get approval for a full demonstration—" "That's our next objective," Harrison confirmed. "I've requested a comparative field test at Aberdeen next month. Both systems, side by side." As they exited the conference room, a staff officer approached with an envelope for Steele. "Orders, sir," the young lieutenant said before departing. Steele opened the envelope and scanned the contents, his expression darkening. "Problem?" Harrison inquired. "I'm being reassigned, effective immediately." Steele handed the orders to Harrison. "Fort Knox, tank commander instructor position." Harrison read the orders, his weathered face revealing momentary anger before settling into resignation. "Chambers works fast. He's getting you out of Washington before the comparative tests." "Can you block this?" Eleanor asked. Harrison shook his head. "This comes from too high up. Someone's calling in favors." He handed the orders back to Steele. "I'm sorry, James. The bureaucratic battlefield has its own rules of engagement." Steele folded the orders deliberately. "So I've noticed, sir." "This isn't over," Harrison assured him. "Go to Knox, train your tankers. I'll continue pushing from here, and I'll keep you informed. Dr. Morgan's team will proceed with the prototype development." Eleanor met Steele's gaze. "We'll send you all the test data. Your input will still be valuable, even from Kentucky." As Steele departed the Pentagon that evening, the setting sun cast long shadows across the river. The reassignment was a setback, but not defeat. If anything, Chambers' reaction confirmed the threat Steele's alternative approach posed to the established program. In his apartment, Steele packed efficiently, military precision evident in his methodical movements. Among his personal effects was a worn leather journal, his father's notes from post-war weapons evaluation teams. He opened it to a dog-eared page featuring hand-drawn diagrams of the Cannone dei 7532 captured in Italy. His father's handwriting filled the margins. Remarkable engineering, simple yet effective, could revolutionize tank gun design if properly developed. Steele traced the faded ink with his finger, history repeating itself, both the innovation and the bureaucratic resistance. His father had seen the potential decades ago, only to have it buried by the military-industrial complex's preference for more complex, expensive solutions. A knock at the door interrupted his reflections. Eleanor Morgan stood in the hallway, a manila envelope in hand. "I thought you might want these before you left," she said, offering him the envelope. "Copies of our latest test results and simulations." Steele invited her in. "I appreciate that. How did you know where I live?" "I have security clearance to know far more sensitive information than your home address, Captain," she replied with a hint of amusement. Steele gestured to his half-packed belongings. "Can I offer you a drink? I'm afraid my hospitality options are limited at the moment." "I'm fine, thank you." Eleanor surveyed the sparse apartment. Her gaze settled on the open journal. "Is that?" "My father's," Steele confirmed. "Major Richard Steele, Army Ordnance Corps, Technical Intelligence Unit. He was part of the team that evaluated captured German and Italian equipment after World War II. Eleanor approached the journal reverently. "May I?" At Steele's nod, she carefully turned the pages, her expert eye recognizing the significance of the detailed notes and drawings. "This is extraordinary," she murmured. "Your father had remarkable insight. These observations about the progressive recoil system. He was decades ahead of his contemporaries." "And ignored, just like we're being ignored now," Steele noted, without bitterness, simply stating fact. Eleanor looked up, studying him with newfound understanding. "This is personal for you, isn't it? Not just professional concern for tank crews or academic interest in weapons development." Steele closed the journal carefully. "My father spent years advocating for improvements based on his findings. He was sidelined, his recommendations buried in classified reports that gathered dust. He died believing his work had been for nothing. And now you're following in his footsteps, fighting the same battle. Different war, same enemy." Steele placed the journal in his suitcase. Bureaucratic inertia, institutional resistance to change, the military-industrial complex preferring expensive new programs over effective solutions. Eleanor handed him the envelope she had brought. "Then you should know something that isn't in these official reports. We found documents during our research. Records of a prototype developed in 1948 based on the Cannone dei 7532 principles. Your father's name appears in the development team roster." Steele's composure faltered momentarily. "What happened to the prototype?" "Canceled in favor of conventional designs. The paperwork claims inconclusive test results, but the actual data tells a different story. It worked, James. Your father was right." The revelation hung between them, weighted with both vindication and frustration. "History doesn't just repeat itself," Steele said quietly. "It echoes. The same battles fought by different soldiers. But this time the outcome might be different," Eleanor asserted. "General Harrison believes in this approach. I believe in it, and the fiscal realities of the defense budget are creating pressure for alternatives to the MBT-70. Steele regarded her with measured hope. "Chambers has powerful allies." "So do we." Eleanor moved toward the door. "Your reassignment isn't the end of this, James. It might even work in our favor. While Chambers thinks you're safely removed from Washington, we'll continue development. By the time you're training crews at Knox, we may have compelling evidence that can't be ignored." As she departed, Steele felt a curious sense of déjà vu. His father had fought this same battle decades earlier, armed with the same evidence, facing the same resistance. The difference now was that Steele had allies: Harrison's influence, Eleanor's technical expertise, and the growing pressure of budget constraints. He resumed packing, his resolve strengthened. Fort Knox wasn't Washington, but it offered its own opportunities. Training the next generation of tank commanders meant shaping their understanding of what American armor could and should be. His gaze fell on his father's journal once more. Perhaps this time history wouldn't merely echo, it would correct itself. Fort Knox, Kentucky, 1970. The M48 Patton tank crested the training hill, its engine roaring as it traversed the muddy terrain. From his position in the commander's cupola, Steele observed the gunner's performance through field glasses. "Target tank, 2 o'clock, range 1,400 meters, he called down. Inside the turret, Lieutenant David Cooper swung the gun tube smoothly, acquiring the target silhouette partially concealed by vegetation. Identified, Cooper confirmed, making minute adjustments to his aim. Fire, Steele ordered. The tank rocked as the main gun discharged a blank round. Downrange, an observer raised a flag indicating a hit. Good. Now let's see if you can manage the same against a moving target with the tank at full speed. The training exercise continued through the afternoon, Steele pushing his students to understand the limitations of their equipment and develop tactics to compensate. These young officers would soon be leading tank platoons, potentially in combat. Their lives and those of their crews would depend on both their skills and their equipment. As the tanks returned to the motor pool, Steele was approached by Master Sergeant Frank Martinez, a grizzled veteran with 20 years of armor experience. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" Martinez asked as they walked alongside the rumbling machines. "Always, Sergeant. Word around the cadre is that you got sent here because you ruffled some feathers at the Pentagon. Something about tank gun design." Steele raised an eyebrow. News travels fast. "The armor community is small, sir." Martinez fell silent as they passed a group of maintenance personnel, then continued. "Thing is, those of us who've been in tanks since Korea, we know something's not right with our current guns. The Soviets outrange us, outpunch us." "That's been my assessment as well, Sergeant." Martinez nodded. "Some of us have been making unofficial modifications. Nothing major, adjusting the recoil buffers, tweaking the fire control, trying to squeeze out a little more performance." Steele stopped walking. "Unofficial modifications aren't exactly by the book, Sergeant. Neither is getting reassigned for telling the truth about our equipment shortcomings, sir." Martinez met his gaze evenly. "With respect, those of us who've faced Soviet-made armor know the score. If war breaks out in Europe tomorrow, our boys are at a disadvantage." Steele considered the veteran non-commissioned officer carefully. "What exactly are you suggesting, Sergeant Martinez?" "We've got a tank in a maintenance bay 4, training vehicle, not slated for field exercises. Been using it as our test bed for some ideas." Martinez's expression remained professionally neutral. "Thought you might be interested in taking a look. Off the record, of course." That evening, Steele found himself in the deserted maintenance bay, examining the modified M48. Martinez and 2 trusted mechanics had implemented a series of subtle changes to the recoil system and breech mechanism. "We based these mods on captured Soviet equipment reports," Martinez explained, pointing out the alterations. "Nothing radical, just trying to improve what we've got." Steele recognized elements that paralleled his own research. "You've essentially recreated aspects of the progressive recoil system I was studying." "Don't know about that, sir. We just know what works based on experience." As they discussed the modifications, Steele realized he had found unexpected allies at Knox. Men like Martinez, practical, experienced combat veterans, instinctively understood the problems Steele had identified through historical research and engineering analysis. "What we really need is a complete redesign of the main gun," Steele admitted, running his hand along the tank's barrel. "The incremental improvements help, but they don't address the fundamental limitations." "That kind of change has to come from the top," Martinez acknowledged. "But in the meantime, we do what we can." The sergeant hesitated, then reached into his pocket and produced a folded newspaper clipping. "Thought you might find this interesting, sir, from last month's Army Times." Steele unfolded the clipping. It was a small article about budget overruns in the MBT-70 program, mentioning that Congress was considering alternative approaches. The final paragraph noted that a historical design-based prototype was showing promising preliminary results at Aberdeen. "Seems your work is continuing without you, sir," Martinez observed. Steele refolded the clipping, a mixture of satisfaction and frustration washing over him. The prototype was progressing, but he was hundreds of miles away, unable to contribute directly. "Thank you for sharing this, Sergeant," Martinez nodded. "One more thing, sir. We've got a live fire exercise scheduled next week at the range. Training tanks only fire blanks, but this one," he patted the modified M48, "is technically operational. If you wanted to see how your modifications perform with actual rounds, that might be arranged." The offer was tempting, but also risky. Unauthorized modifications to weapon systems, combined with unsanctioned live fire testing, could end careers. "Let me think about it, Sergeant." Later that night, Steele received a phone call in his quarters. The operator announced a call from Washington, D.C. "James," Eleanor's voice came through clearly despite the late hour. "I hope I'm not calling too late." "Not at all," Steele replied, instantly alert. "How are things progressing?" "Better than expected. We've completed the initial firing tests. The results are significant. 30% greater muzzle velocity improved accuracy at extended ranges, and no increase in barrel wear rate, Steele felt a surge of vindication. That's consistent with what the historical data suggested. There's more, Eleanor continued, her voice lowering slightly. We found additional documentation on your father's prototype. It wasn't just similar to our current work, it was virtually identical in concept. James, your father had already solved many of the problems we're facing now, over 20 years ago. The revelation landed like a physical blow. Steele sank into his desk chair, processing the implications. His father's work hadn't just been ignored, it had been buried, only to be reinvented decades later at great expense. Who made the decision to cancel his project? Steele asked, though he suspected the answer. The documentation is incomplete, Eleanor hedged. But there are memos from the procurement office questioning the need for improved tank guns, given the nuclear focus of the era. Conventional warfare capabilities were considered secondary priorities. Short-sighted, Steele muttered. How's the current political situation? Is Harrison making progress with the budget committee? That's the other reason I'm calling. There's been a development. Eleanor paused. Chambers has connected with Armstech Corporation. They're pushing an alternative to the MBT-70, a new design that incorporates some of our concepts but with proprietary systems that would lock the Army into their supply chain for decades. Clever, Steele acknowledged grimly. When the original program becomes untenable, pivot to an alternative that still serves their interests. Harrison is furious. He believes Chambers has been coordinating with Armstech all along, positioning them for this moment. Steele considered the implications. What's our next move? Harrison wants you back in Washington, Eleanor revealed. Not officially, your reassignment stands, but he's arranged for you to consult on upcoming comparative tests. Can you get leave from Knox for about a week next month? I'll make it happen, Steele promised. Is there anything else I should know? Eleanor hesitated. Just be careful, James. Chambers knows you're a threat to his plans. If he realizes you're coming back into the picture. The warning hung unfinished, but Steele understood. The stakes had escalated beyond academic debates or budget considerations. Careers, reputations, and millions in defense contracts now hinged on which approach prevailed. I'll see you next month, Steele said. Keep pushing forward. After hanging up, Steele returned to the material he'd been reviewing before the call, his father's journal, and the technical documents Eleanor had provided. Spread across his desk, they told a story of innovation, resistance, and buried potential. His father had recognized the value of the Italian cannon's design principles decades earlier. Now Steele was fighting the same battle, against the same institutional inertia, with the lives of American tank crews hanging in the balance. He thought of Sergeant Martinez's modified tank sitting in Maintenance Bay 4. Perhaps it was time to see exactly what those modifications could achieve in a live-fire demonstration. The data would be valuable, even if gathering it bent some regulations. History was offering a second chance to learn from its lessons. This time, Steele was determined not to let the opportunity slip away. Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, 1970. The demonstration day dawned clear and cold. Military and civilian officials gathered in the observation bunker overlooking the test range. Steele stood alongside Eleanor and General Harrison, watching as technicians made final preparations on two tanks positioned at the firing line. The M60A1 on the left features our modified gun system incorporating the Italian Cannone dei 7532 principles, Eleanor explained to the assembled observers. The tank on the right is the standard production M60A1 with the current 105mm gun. Both will engage identical target sets at ranges from 1,000 to 2,500 meters. Colonel Chambers stood apart from their group, flanked by representatives from Armstech Corporation. His expression betrayed no emotion, but the tension in his posture was evident. The standard M60A1 fired first. At 1,500 meters, it successfully engaged the target tank silhouette, the shell penetrating the frontal armor plate. At 2,000 meters, accuracy diminished significantly. At 2,500 meters, 2 of 3 rounds missed completely, and the third struck but failed to penetrate. Next, the modified tank took position. The first round at 1,500 meters not only penetrated the target, but passed completely through it. At 2,000 meters, all rounds hit with precision. At 2,500 meters, beyond the effective range of the standard gun, the modified system placed 3 perfect shots that would have been kill shots against any Soviet tank. Murmurs of approval rippled through the observation bunker. The congressional representatives exchanged impressed glances. Now for the mobility test, Eleanor announced. Both tanks maneuvered through a tactical course, firing on the move at various targets. Again, the modified system demonstrated superior accuracy and penetration power under dynamic conditions. As the demonstration concluded, Harrison stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, what you've witnessed today represents a significant advancement in American tank gun technology. Most importantly, these improvements can be implemented as upgrades to our existing tank fleet at approximately one-fifth the cost of developing an entirely new platform. One of the congressmen raised a hand. General, how quickly could this modification be implemented across the force? Before Harrison could answer, Chambers interjected. If I may, Congressman, while today's demonstration shows promising results under controlled conditions, there are significant questions about durability, maintenance requirements, and integration with existing fire control systems that remain unanswered. Those questions have been addressed in our technical documentation, Eleanor countered. Durability testing shows the modified system actually reduces strain on the turret ring and hull. Maintenance procedures remain virtually unchanged, and integration with existing fire control systems requires only minor software adjustments. The debate continued as the group moved from the observation bunker to a nearby conference facility. Steele found himself cornered by a silver-haired congressman he recognized from earlier Pentagon meetings. Captain Steele, the man extended his hand. Congressman Robert Whitmore, House Armed Services Committee. I understand this modified gun system owes much to your historical research. The concept dates back much further than my work, sir, Steele replied modestly. I simply recognized its potential application to our current challenges. Whitmore nodded thoughtfully. You know, this reminds me of a program I reviewed early in my congressional career. Must have been 49 or 50. Similar concept, adapting captured Axis technology to improve our tank guns. It was canceled before completion. Steele's pulse quickened. Do you recall why it was canceled, sir? The official explanation was budget constraints and shifting priorities, Whitmore replied. But between us, there were powerful interests who preferred more complex, expensive solutions. The defense contractors of that era didn't profit much from elegant adaptations of existing technology. The more things change, Steele began, the more they stay the same, Whitmore finished with a knowing look. I've been watching Colonel Chambers and his arms tech friends. Same playbook, different decade. He glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. Your father was Richard Steele, wasn't he? Steele couldn't hide his surprise. Yes, sir. How did you know? I was a junior congressman on the oversight committee that reviewed his project. Too junior to save it, unfortunately. Whitmore's expression turned regretful. He was right, you know. His design would have given us parity with Soviet armor development a decade earlier. Instead, we're playing catch-up now, at 10 times the cost. The congressman patted Steele's shoulder. History deserves a second chance, Captain. I'll be making my views on this demonstration very clear to my colleagues. As Whitmore moved away to join the other officials, Eleanor approached. That looked like a positive conversation, she observed. Congressman Whitmore apparently reviewed my father's prototype project back in 1950, Steele replied, still processing the revelation. He remembers it, and him. Eleanor's eyes widened. That's unexpected. History doesn't just repeat itself, Steele said quietly. Sometimes it offers redemption. Their conversation was interrupted as Colonel Chambers approached, his face a mask of professional courtesy. Captain Steele, quite the demonstration. His tone betrayed no emotion. I wasn't aware you had been recalled from your assignment at Fort Knox for this event. Temporary consulting role, Colonel, Steele replied evenly, at General Harrison's request. I see. Chambers' gaze shifted to Eleanor. Dr. Morgan, the Armstech representatives have some technical questions about the comparative stress measurements. Would you mind addressing them? As Eleanor moved away, Chambers stepped closer to Steele, his voice lowering. Impressive show today, Captain, but demonstrations and production are very different matters. The Pentagon doesn't run on impressive demonstrations. It runs on relationships, influence, and established procurement channels. It should run on providing the best possible equipment to American soldiers at the most reasonable cost to taxpayers, Steele countered. Chambers smiled thinly. Idealism, admirable but ultimately futile in Washington. Your father learned that lesson the hard way, didn't he? The deliberate reference to his father sent a chill through Steele. Chambers was sending a clear message. He knew everything, including the personal significance of this project to Steele. My father's work was buried for political reasons, not technical ones, Steele stated calmly. That mistake cost American lives in Korea and Vietnam. I don't intend to let history repeat itself. Strong words, Chambers replied. But history has momentum, Captain. Individual men rarely change its course, especially when they're fighting established institutions. With that, Chambers rejoined the Armstead representatives, leaving Steele to contemplate the veiled threat. The battle lines were now clearly drawn. On one side stood Steele, Harrison, and Eleanor, advocating for a practical, cost-effective solution based on historical lessons. On the other, Chambers and his corporate allies, fighting to maintain control of the lucrative tank development program. What remained unclear was which side would ultimately prevail in the Pentagon's corridors of power. Steele knew from his father's experience that being right wasn't always enough. But perhaps this time, with budget pressures mounting and Soviet armor advancing, the practical solution might finally win out over politics. As the officials departed and technicians secured the test range, Steele remained behind, walking out to examine the modified M60. Up close, the adaptations were subtle: a redesigned breech, modified recoil system, strengthened barrel. Simple changes yielding profound improvements. The Italian designers of the original Cannone dei 7532 would likely never know that their innovative solution, largely overlooked during World War II, might yet transform American tank warfare decades later. But that was the nature of progress, building on the forgotten wisdom of the past to create a better future. Steele ran his hand along the gun barrel, feeling a connection not just to the technology, but to his father's legacy. The battle wasn't over, but today had been a significant victory. For the first time since beginning this journey, Steele allowed himself to believe they might actually succeed where his father had been defeated. History had offered a second chance. The forgotten cannon might yet have its day. Pentagon, Arlington, Virginia, 1971. The fluorescent lights of the secure conference room cast harsh shadows across the scale models of tanks arranged on the central table. General Harrison stood at the head, his weathered face grave as he addressed the small group of trusted officers and engineers. Gentlemen, Dr. Morgan, the situation has changed. The MBT-70 program has been officially terminated by Congress. A ripple of reaction moved through the room. Steele, recently returned to Washington at Harrison's request, exchanged a glance with Eleanor. This development had been inevitable given the program's massive cost overruns and technical challenges, but the finality of it still landed with impact. The good news, Harrison continued, is that we've been authorized to proceed with development of an alternative main battle tank. The XM-1 program is now officially active. He gestured to the prototype designs on the table. Our modified gun system performed exceptionally in trials. The Congressional Appropriations Committee was impressed enough to allocate initial funding for continued development. Colonel Victor Chambers sat silently at the far end of the table, his expression unreadable. The termination of the MBT-70 program represented a significant setback for him professionally. Yet here he was, still present at this planning meeting for its replacement. There's more, Harrison said, his tone sharpening. Armstead Corporation has submitted an unsolicited proposal for the XM-1 program. They're advocating for a completely new tank design incorporating elements of our gun system, but with proprietary modifications that would significantly increase costs. Chambers cleared his throat. General, if I may, Armstead's proposal includes advanced composite armor and computerized fire control systems that go beyond the current modification approach. Their analysis suggests these additions would provide superior battlefield performance. At triple the cost, Harrison countered, and with development timelines that would leave our current armor force outmatched for the next decade. Steele studied the models before him. The path forward seemed clear enough. Continue development of the modified gun system for existing platforms while simultaneously designing the next-generation tank around proven technologies rather than speculative ones. Sir, Steele addressed Harrison, what's our mandate from the Appropriations Committee? To deliver improved armor capability as rapidly and cost-effectively as possible, Harrison replied. Specifically, they have authorized parallel development tracks, immediate upgrades to the M60 fleet with our modified gun system, and accelerated development of the XM-1 incorporating the same gun technology in a new hull design. Eleanor stepped forward, activating a slide projector. Technical diagrams of the modified gun system appeared on the wall screen. We've refined the design based on test results, she explained. The recoil management system has been further improved, allowing for even greater muzzle velocity without excessive wear on the barrel or stress on the turret. She advanced to the next slide, showing comparative penetration data. Against simulated Soviet T-62 and T-72 armor, our system achieves consistent penetration at ranges up to 2,800 meters, a 35% improvement over the standard gun. Chambers leaned forward. Impressive results, Doctor, but laboratory tests don't account for battlefield conditions. Dust, extreme temperatures, sustained combat operations, these factors can significantly degrade performance. Which is why we're recommending immediate field testing in realistic conditions, Eleanor countered smoothly, including deployment of a limited number of modified tanks to Europe for evaluation in NATO exercises. Harrison nodded. Already approved. The 3rd Armored Division will receive 12 modified M60A1s for the upcoming Reforger exercises in Germany. Chambers' composure slipped momentarily, revealing surprise. He hadn't been informed of this decision. That seems premature, he objected. We haven't completed the full battery of environmental testing protocols. Those will proceed in parallel, Harrison stated firmly. The Soviet armor threat isn't waiting for our testing protocols, Colonel. Intelligence reports indicate continued deployment of T-72s with their 125 mm smoothbore guns, weapons that currently outrange and outperform our standard tanks. The meeting continued with detailed discussions of implementation timelines and resource allocation. Throughout, Steele observed the shifting dynamics. Chambers, though officially part of the new XM1 program office, had clearly been sidelined in key decisions. His connection to the failed MBT-70 program and his known relationship with Armstead had damaged his standing. As the meeting concluded, Harrison held Steele back with a discreet gesture. "Walk with me, Captain," the general said, once the others had departed. They moved through the Pentagon's corridors in silence until reaching Harrison's office, a modest space decorated with photos of tank units from World War II through Vietnam. "You've been quiet today," Harrison observed, closing the door. "Processing the implications, sir," Steele replied. "The termination of MBT-70 creates an opportunity, but also vulnerabilities. Chambers and Armstead won't surrender their influence easily." Harrison settled into his chair with a sigh. "You've developed good political instincts since coming to Washington. You're right, this is just the beginning of a new phase in the battle." He fixed Steele with an evaluating gaze. "How would you like to command one of those modified tanks in Germany?" The question caught Steele off guard. "Sir, the 3rd Armored needs experienced officers who understand both the technology and its strategic implications. Colonel Morrison specifically requested you when I mentioned the field trials." "Morrison," Steele repeated, remembering the commander who had first sent his report to the Pentagon years earlier. "He's with 3rd Armored now?" "Commanding the 2nd Brigade," Harrison confirmed. "Those 12 modified tanks will be under his direct authority, and he wants you leading one of the companies." Steele considered the offer carefully. It meant leaving the development program at a critical juncture, but also provided an opportunity to prove the system's effectiveness in conditions that mattered most: realistic field operations against simulated Soviet forces. "What about Chambers and Armstead?" Steele asked. "Won't my absence give them room to influence the program?" "Dr. Morgan has that front covered," Harrison assured him. "And frankly, your presence in Germany demonstrating the system's effectiveness will be more valuable than another voice in these meeting rooms. Success in Reforger will silence critics more effectively than any argument here." Steele nodded, decision made. "When do I leave, sir?" "Next week. You'll have time to familiarize yourself with the modified tanks at Aberdeen before deployment." Harrison rose, extending his hand. "This is important, James, not just for the program, but for every American tank crew who might face Soviet armor in combat. Make it count." "I will, sir." As Steele departed the Pentagon that evening, he found Eleanor waiting near his car. "I heard about your new assignment," she said without preamble. "Harrison moves quickly," Steele observed. "He knows the value of getting the right people in the right positions." Eleanor handed him a thick folder. "Technical specifications and performance data for the modified tanks you'll be commanding. I've included notes on optimal engagement procedures based on our test results." Steele accepted the folder. "Thank you, this will be valuable." "There's something else you should know," Eleanor continued, her voice lowering. "Chambers met with Armstead executives yesterday at the Metropolitan Club. One of our engineers spotted them and overheard fragments of their conversation." "What kind of fragments?" "Enough to confirm they're not giving up. Armstead is preparing a major push to take control of the XM1 program, including a media campaign suggesting that our approach is inadequate against next-generation Soviet armor." "Based on what evidence?" "Fabricated technical assessments, apparently. They're claiming to have intelligence on advanced Soviet composite armor that would render our penetrator rounds ineffective. Steele processed this information grimly. Political warfare. Exactly, Eleanor agreed, which is why your mission in Germany is so critical. Real-world performance data from NATO exercises will be our most powerful counter to their theoretical objections. They stood in silence for a moment, both aware of the stakes extending far beyond professional reputations or program funding. Be careful over there, James, Eleanor said finally. This isn't just about tanks anymore. There's too much money and influence at stake. Chambers and his corporate allies won't hesitate to discredit anyone threatening their interests. I'll remember that, Steele promised. Take care of things here. Don't let them subvert the program while I'm gone. Count on it, Eleanor replied with determination that matched his own. As she turned to leave, Steele called after her. Eleanor, the Italian cannon we based all this on, the designers never saw their work reach its potential during their war. Let's make sure their innovation doesn't go to waste in ours. She smiled at that. History redeemed. I like the sound of that. Grafenwohr Training Area, West Germany, 1971. Rain streaked across the armored glass of the commander's cupola as Steele surveyed the training ground through his binoculars. Visibility was poor, exactly the conditions Soviet forces would exploit for an assault across the Fulda Gap. Perfect for evaluating the modified tank's performance under adverse conditions. All tanks, this is Iron 6, Steele spoke into his radio headset. Deploy to phase line Bravo. Maintain tactical spacing. Expect contact within 15 minutes. Acknowledgements came back from the other 5 tank commanders in his company. Through the rain, Steele could make out their silhouettes. Modified M60A1s with the distinctive longer barrel of the new gun system. They moved with practiced precision, taking up hold-down positions along a low ridgeline overlooking a valley. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Morrison's voice crackled over the command channel. Iron 6, this is Ramrod Actual. OPFOR reports T-62s moving in your sector. Expect contact in approximately 10 mics. You are cleared to engage beyond standard range parameters if the modified system allows. Roger that, Ramrod Actual, Steele confirmed. Iron Company will engage at maximum effective range. Inside the turret, Sergeant Jenkins, Steele's gunner from years earlier, now served as his tank's gunner instructor for the NATO exercise. He had followed Steele from Germany to Fort Knox and now back to Europe, his experience with the standard gun system making him invaluable in evaluating the modified version. Visibility's for shit, Captain, Jenkins observed, peering through his primary sight. Old system, we'd be lucky to hit anything beyond 1,000 meters in this rain. Let's see what the new gun can do, Steele replied. Target identification is still the limiting factor, not the gun's capability. Master Sergeant Raymond Carter, Steele's tank commander during this exercise, nodded in agreement. Thermal sights would solve that problem. One upgrade at a time, Sergeant, Steele said. For now, we work with what we have. The radio crackled with reports from forward observers. OPFOR, British chieftain tanks playing the role of Soviet forces, had been spotted moving through the valley 2 kilometers ahead. The exercise was now live. All tanks, load TPDS, Steele ordered, referring to the training version of the armor-piercing, discarding sabot round. Prepare to engage on my command. The rain intensified, reducing visibility further. Under normal circumstances, American tankers would withhold fire until enemy vehicles closed to 1,200 meters or less, ensuring higher probability of hit. Today, however, they would test the extended range capability of their modified guns. Target identified, Carter announced suddenly. Battle formation, advancing along Route Green, range 2,400 meters. Can you confirm, Jenkins? Steele asked. Affirmative, the gunner replied after a moment. I count 7 vehicles, lead elements just passing the burned-out farmhouse. At that distance, through heavy rain, with standard equipment, such identification would have been nearly impossible. But Jenkins was exceptional, and the marginally improved optics of the modified tanks provided just enough edge. All tanks, this is Iron 6, Steele commanded. OPFOR identified, range 2400, track lead elements. Stand by to engage on my mark. He waited, monitoring the OPFOR's advance. The opposing force would be operating under the assumption that they were still beyond effective range of the American tanks. That miscalculation would prove costly in a real engagement. Fire, Steele ordered when the range closed to 2,300 meters. 6 modified M60A1s fired nearly simultaneously. Through his binoculars, Steele observed 4 direct hits on the advancing OPFOR vehicles. The exercise controllers raised kill flags over the struck tanks. "Reload and adjust," Steele commanded. "Target remaining vehicles." The second volley claimed 2 more outward tanks. The last, now aware it was under effective fire, attempted evasive maneuvers, but the third coordinated volley found its mark. "All hope for our vehicles and neutralize," De Guardia reported with satisfaction. "Range at final engagement, 2,100 meters. Cease fire, all tanks," Steele ordered. "Maintain positions and prepare for after-action review." The radio came alive with Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's voice. "Iron 6, Ramrod actual. Impressive shooting. Op 4 commander reports they had no idea they were within your engagement range. They're somewhat displeased." "The element of surprise, sir," Steele replied. "Soviet doctrine won't account for our improved capabilities until it's too late." "Exactly the point of these exercises," Morrison agreed. "Continue to phase line, Charlie. Intelligence reports additional OP4 elements moving to reinforce." Throughout the day, Steele's company engaged multiple OP4 formations at ranges that would have been prohibitive with standard equipment. By the end of the exercise, the modified tanks had achieved an unprecedented 73% first-round hit probability at ranges beyond 2,000 meters, nearly double the standard M60A1's performance. At the forward operating base that evening, senior officers from multiple NATO countries gathered for the after-action review. Steele presented the performance data from the modified tanks, emphasizing the tactical advantages of engaging Soviet armor before it could close to its preferred combat range. "The implications for NATO defensive planning are significant," he concluded. "With these modifications implemented across our armor forces, we can effectively extend our defense lines by as much as 25% without sacrificing lethality." The British liaison officer, Brigadier Harrington, raised a pertinent question. "Impressive capabilities, Captain Steele, but how quickly could these modifications be implemented across NATO's tank forces? The Soviet advantage in numbers remains significant." "The modifications are designed specifically for rapid implementation, sir," Steele explained. "The gun system can be installed during routine maintenance cycles with minimal additional training for crew and maintenance personnel. At current production capacity, we could modify the entire NATO tank fleet within 18 months. As the briefing concluded, Morrison approached Steele with a visitor, a silver-haired man in civilian clothes whom Steele recognized immediately. "Congressman Whitmore?" Steele greeted him with surprise. "I didn't expect to see you in Germany." "House Armed Services Committee oversight visit," Whitmore explained, shaking Steele's hand warmly. "Though I made sure my itinerary included observing your modified tanks in action. Most impressive, Captain." "Thank you, sir. The results speak for themselves." "Indeed they do," Whitmore agreed, "which is precisely why certain parties back in Washington are working so diligently to discredit them." Morrison excused himself tactfully, leaving Steele and the congressman to speak privately. "I've been following the situation closely," Whitmore continued once they were alone. "Armstead's lobbyists have been extraordinarily active on Capitol Hill, pushing their alternative proposal for the XM1 program. They've arranged demonstrations for key committee members, showcasing prototypes with their proprietary systems. All while our team is deployed in Germany," Steele noted, unable to counter their claims directly. "Precisely," Whitmore confirmed. "Colonel Chambers has been particularly effective, leveraging his Pentagon connections to raise questions about the long-term viability of your approach." Steele felt a familiar frustration rising. The same political maneuvering that had buried his father's innovations decades earlier was now threatening to repeat itself. "The data from these exercises is unequivocal, Congressman. The modified system works. It's cost-effective, can be rapidly deployed, and gives our forces the edge they need against Soviet armor." "I don't need convincing," Captain Whitmore assured him. "But politics rarely yields to data alone, no matter how compelling. Armstead spent over $7 million on lobbying activities last quarter. They're not making that kind of investment without expecting returns." "What are you suggesting, sir?" Whitmore glanced around to ensure their privacy. "I'm suggesting that your return to Washington might be more urgently needed than your continued presence here. The real battle for the future of American armor isn't being fought in these training grounds. It's happening in committee rooms and at cocktail parties in Georgetown." The congressman's candor was refreshing, if troubling. Steele had seen enough of Washington politics to know the accuracy of Whitmore's assessment. "I'm scheduled to remain with 3rd Armored for another 3 weeks, completing the NATO evaluation," Steele said. "I can arrange to have those orders modified," Whitmore offered. "As a senior member of armed services, My request for your expert testimony would supersede the current deployment. Steele considered the offer carefully. The field testing was proceeding exceptionally well, with the modified tanks consistently outperforming expectations. His presence, while valuable for addressing technical questions, was no longer essential to the evaluation's success. I appreciate the offer, Congressman. Let me consult with General Harrison before making that decision. Whitmore nodded. Of course, but don't delay too long, Captain. The appropriations vote for next year's defense budget is scheduled for next month. If Armstead's proposal gains traction before then, it could set back your program significantly. After Whitmore departed, Steele placed a secure call to the Pentagon. Harrison answered on the second ring, suggesting he'd been expecting the call. I've just spoken with Congressman Whitmore, Steele began without preamble. I thought you might, Harrison replied. He contacted me before leaving for Germany. He painted a concerning picture of the situation in Washington, sir. Harrison's sigh was audible even through the secure line. If anything, he understated it. Chambers and Armstead have mounted a full-court press. They're hosting demonstrations, briefing journalists, courting committee members, all while emphasizing the limitations of our approach rather than its proven advantages. Limitations that don't exist in actual field conditions, Steele noted with frustration. Facts that matter less than perception in Washington, Harrison countered. Eleanor has been fighting a holding action, but she's a technical expert, not a political operator. We need you back here, James. The decision crystallized. Whitmore offered to expedite new orders. Take him up on it, Harrison advised without hesitation. The NATO evaluation will continue without you. The data is what matters, and that's already compelling. We need your voice in Washington to ensure that data isn't buried or misrepresented. Understood, sir. I'll inform Colonel Morrison and make arrangements to return as soon as possible. Good, Harrison approved. And James, prepare yourself. This fight is about to get considerably uglier. Pentagon, Arlington, Virginia, 1971. The hearing room buzzed with murmured conversations as congressional staff and military officials took their seats. At the witness table, Steele adjusted his uniform jacket, reviewing his prepared testimony one final time. Beside him, Eleanor Morgan arranged her technical documentation with precise movements that belied her nervousness. Across the room, Colonel Chambers sat with Armstead executives, their expressions coolly confident. They had reason to be. The previous day's session had featured their alternative XM1 proposal, complete with impressive visual aids and promises of revolutionary capabilities. Today, Steele and Eleanor would present the competing approach, the modified gun system already proving itself in NATO exercises. The contrast couldn't be starker. Proven, cost-effective technology versus expensive promises of future superiority. Congressman Whitmore entered with his colleagues from the Armed Services Committee, taking his place at the center of the dais. As chairman of the Weapons Procurement Subcommittee, he would lead today's proceedings. This hearing will come to order, Whitmore announced, bringing the room to attention. We continue our review of proposals for the XM1 main battle tank program. Yesterday, we heard testimony regarding the Armstead Corporation proposal. Today, we will examine the modified gun system approach currently under evaluation by NATO forces. He nodded toward Steele. Our first witness is Captain James Steele, United States Army, currently assigned to the XM1 Development Program Office and recently returned from field evaluations in West Germany. Captain Steele, you may proceed with your opening statement. Steele rose, facing the committee with the same steady composure he would display commanding a tank in combat. Mr. Chairman, distinguished committee members, thank you for this opportunity. I come before you today not merely as a program officer, but as a tank commander who has faced the realities of modern armored warfare. He outlined the modified gun system's development, emphasizing its historical foundations and the proven results from NATO exercises. As he spoke, Eleanor displayed photographs and performance data on the room's projection screen. The modified M60A1 tanks consistently engaged targets at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters with first-round hit probabilities above 70%, nearly doubling the standard capabilities. This performance was achieved in adverse weather conditions against moving targets, simulating realistic combat scenarios. Steele continued with the practical implications. Most significantly, these improvements can be implemented across our existing tank fleet at approximately one-fifth the cost of developing entirely new platforms. American tank crews could have this enhanced capability within 18 months, rather than waiting a decade or more for new tank development. The committee members leaned forward, engaged by the compelling data and Steele's authoritative delivery. Their questions focused on practical considerations, maintenance requirements, crew training, logistics support. Then came the challenging inquiry from Congressman Davis, known for his close ties to defense contractors. Captain Steele, yesterday we heard testimony that your modified gun system would be ineffective against advanced Soviet composite armor currently under development. How do you respond to those concerns? Steele recognized the question as planted by Armstech's representatives. Congressman, those concerns are based on speculative intelligence regarding hypothetical Soviet developments. Our system has demonstrated penetration capabilities exceeding requirements for all known Soviet armor, including the T-72. Furthermore, the modular nature of our design allows for continuous improvement as threats evolve. Davis persisted. But if the Soviets have indeed developed this advanced armor, wouldn't we be investing in soon-to-be obsolete technology? Sir, with respect, that logic applies equally to any system under development today, Steele countered. The critical difference is that our approach provides immediate capability improvements for existing tanks while simultaneously informing next-generation design. The alternative is to leave our current forces outmatched while waiting years for a theoretical perfect solution. Eleanor added technical context. Congressman, armor and anti-armor development has always been cyclical. No system remains permanently superior. Our approach allows for rapid adaptation as threats evolve, rather than committing to fixed designs that may become obsolete before deployment. The questioning continued for nearly 3 hours. Throughout, Steele maintained his focus on the practical benefits of the modified system: proven performance, cost-effectiveness, rapid implementation. Eleanor provided technical depth when needed, her expertise evident and respected even by skeptical committee members. As the hearing concluded, Whitmore addressed the room. We thank our witnesses for their testimony. This committee will continue deliberations on the appropriate path forward for the XM1 program, balancing capability requirements with fiscal responsibility and the urgent need to address the Soviet armor threat. In the corridor outside, Eleanor exhaled deeply. That went better than I expected. Even Davis seemed to run out of steam toward the end. He was pushing Armstech's talking points, Steele observed. But the data is difficult to argue against, especially with the NATO exercise results now available. General Harrison approached, having observed the proceedings from the back of the room. Well done, both of you. Whitmore tells me several committee members were impressed. The tide may be turning in our favor. Chambers didn't look concerned, Steele noted. He knows something we don't. Harrison nodded grimly. Intelligence picked up unusual activity at Armstech's proving grounds. They're preparing some kind of demonstration, likely attempting to undermine our position before the committee votes next week. What kind of demonstration? Eleanor asked. Unknown, but we have reason to believe they've acquired samples of experimental Soviet armor plate through third parties. They may be staging penetration tests designed to show limitations in our system against next-generation threats. Steele considered the implications. Rigged demonstrations, hard to counter without access to the same materials or test conditions. Exactly, Harrison confirmed, which is why we need our own counter-demonstration, something that definitively proves the effectiveness of our system against the most challenging targets available. Aberdeen has T-72 hulls captured in the Middle East, Eleanor suggested. We could arrange comparative testing against those. Not dramatic enough, Harrison demurred. Armstech is going for spectacle. We need something equally compelling but genuinely scientific. Steele thought for a moment. What about Sergeant Martinez's modified tank at Fort Knox? The unofficial one. Harrison raised an eyebrow. The training vehicle you mentioned, with the unauthorized modifications? Yes, sir. Martinez and his team essentially recreated aspects of our system through practical field experience, without access to the theoretical foundations. It's a powerful demonstration that the principles work so well even experienced tank crews independently develop similar solutions. The general considered this. Bring Martinez and his tank to Aberdeen. We'll conduct a comparative demonstration, the officially modified M60A1 alongside Martinez's field-modified version, against the same targets. It proves the fundamental soundness of the approach from two independent development paths. That could work, Eleanor agreed. We could invite key committee members to observe. Seeing is believing. Make it happen, Harrison directed. We have 5 days before the committee votes on appropriations. This may be our last opportunity to secure support for our approach. As they parted ways, Steele couldn't shake the feeling that Chambers and Armstead had more planned than a simple counter-demonstration. The stakes were too high, the potential profits too enormous for them to concede without employing every possible advantage. The battle for the future of American armor was approaching its decisive engagement, and like any good tank commander, Steele knew that anticipating the enemy's next move would be crucial to victory. Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, 1971. The demonstration area had been prepared with military precision. 3 tanks stood on the firing line, a standard production M60A1 with the original 105mm gun, a prototype featuring the officially modified gun system, and Sergeant Martinez's unofficially modified training tank, transported from Fort Knox. Downrange, various targets had been positioned at ranges from 1,000 to 3,000 meters, including captured Soviet armor plate and a decommissioned T-55 tank. The weather was clear, visibility excellent, perfect conditions for a definitive demonstration. Congressman Whitmore had arranged for 6 key committee members to attend, including the skeptical Congressman Davis. They now stood in the observation bunker alongside General Harrison, Eleanor, and representatives from the Army's Weapons Testing Division. Steele conferred with Master Sergeant Martinez beside their tanks. The veteran NCO had arrived the previous day, bringing his modified M48 and 2 trusted mechanics. Despite his discomfort at being thrust into the political spotlight, Martinez understood the importance of the demonstration. "Everything checked out during pre-fire inspections," Martinez reported. "She's ready to show what she can do." "Remember, this isn't a competition between our versions," Steele reminded him. "We're demonstrating that the core principles work so well that they were independently developed through both theoretical research and practical field experience." Martinez nodded. "Understood, sir. Though I still say my recoil springs are better than the ones your engineers designed." Steele smiled at the sergeant's pride in his work. "Save that debate for after we win this battle." The demonstration began with the standard M60A1, establishing the baseline performance. As expected, it achieved consistent hits at ranges up to 1,500 meters, but struggled beyond that distance. Against the T-55 at 2,000 meters, it required multiple rounds to achieve a killing hit. Next came the officially modified prototype, operated by a crew from Aberdeen's testing division. Its performance was exceptional, with first-round hits at all ranges, including the maximum 3,000-meter target. The penetration against captured Soviet armor was particularly impressive, the rounds punching through with devastating effectiveness. Finally, Martinez's tank took position. Despite being an older M48 model rather than the newer M60A1, its performance nearly matched the official prototype, confirming that the principles transcended specific platforms and could be applied across the entire American tank fleet. In the observation bunker, the congressional representatives watched with growing appreciation. Even Davis seemed impressed by the consistent results. "Remarkable consistency between the 2 modified systems," Whitmore observed to his colleagues, especially considering they were developed independently. The final phase of the demonstration involved all 3 tanks engaging moving targets towed on sleds at various ranges. Again, the modified systems demonstrated significantly superior performance, achieving hit rates that would translate directly to combat effectiveness on the battlefield. As the demonstration concluded, Steele and Martinez joined the observers in the bunker for questions and discussion. The atmosphere was positive, with several representatives openly expressing support for the modified gun approach. Congressman Davis, however, remained reserved. "Impressive showing, Captain Steele, but I understand Armstead will be demonstrating their system against advanced composite armor samples tomorrow. Shouldn't we withhold judgment until we've seen both systems against the most challenging threats?" "With respect, Congressman," Steele replied, "we've requested access to the same armor samples Armstead is using but have been denied. That raises questions about the validity of their comparative testing." Whitmore intervened. "I've formally requested that any materials used in demonstrations for congressional evaluation be made available to all competing programs. We'll see if Armstead complies." As the representatives departed for their next appointment, Martinez approached Steele privately. "Something's not right with this Armstead demonstration they keep mentioning, sir," the sergeant said in a low voice. "My buddy in procurement tells me they've been importing some kind of special armor plate through a German intermediary. Classified stuff, not standard Soviet equipment. Specially designed to resist our penetrators," Steele surmised. "That would be my guess. Stack the deck, make our rounds look ineffective." Steele relayed this information to Harrison and Eleanor once the visitors had departed. It would be consistent with their approach so far, Eleanor acknowledged. But how do we counter a rigged demonstration? Harrison's expression was grim. We need to know exactly what they're planning. If they're using non-representative test materials to create a false impression, we need to expose that before the committee votes. I might have a way, Eleanor said after a thoughtful pause. One of our engineers used to work for a subcontractor to Arms Tech. He still has contacts there who might share information, especially if they believe the testing is being manipulated. Make the contact, Harrison directed. We need to know what we're facing by tomorrow morning. The Arms Tech demonstration is scheduled for 1400 hours. That evening, Steele received an urgent call in his temporary quarters at Aberdeen. Eleanor's voice came through tense and hurried. James, we've got it. My contact came through. Arms Tech has obtained specially manufactured armor plate that appears identical to captured Soviet samples, but has been specifically treated to resist the type of penetrator round our modified guns use. How certain are we about this? Steele asked, already calculating potential responses. Certain enough. They have documentation, specifications showing the chemical composition is significantly different from actual Soviet armor. They've essentially created a demonstration prop designed to make our system look ineffective, while their proprietary penetrator, using a different principle, succeeds. We need to get this information to Whitmore immediately, Steele decided, and prepare our own counter-demonstration for tomorrow. Already in progress, Eleanor confirmed. I've secured samples of both the actual Soviet armor plate and the Arms Tech special version. Side-by-side testing will expose the deception. Steele smiled at her foresight. Always one step ahead. I try, she replied, a hint of weariness in her voice. This isn't just about tank guns anymore, James. It's about integrity in the defense procurement process. If companies can manipulate testing to secure contracts, I know, Steele acknowledged, the implications go far beyond our program. The next morning dawned with renewed tension. Word had spread throughout Aberdeen about the competing demonstrations scheduled for that day. Arms Tech representatives moved about the facility with confident expressions, preparing their prototype for what they clearly expected to be a decisive showing. Steele, Harrison, and Eleanor met in a secure room to finalize their strategy. Whitmore has arranged for the full committee to witness both demonstrations, Harrison explained. Arms Tech goes first at 1400, followed immediately by our counter-demonstration at 1530. What's our approach? Steele asked. Eleanor laid out technical diagrams. Direct comparison. We'll fire identical rounds from our modified gun against both the actual Soviet armor plate and Arms Tech's special version, demonstrating the dramatic difference in performance. Then we'll reveal the metallurgical analysis showing the composition differences. Chambers will claim we're making unfounded accusations, Harrison warned, which is why we have this. Eleanor produced a document bearing official stamps. Verification from the Army Materials Research Laboratory confirming the Arms Tech plate is not representative of any known Soviet armor in composition or performance characteristics. Steele studied the document. This is definitive. They can't argue against their own metallurgical composition. They'll try, Harrison predicted, but the evidence should be compelling enough for the committee to recognize the deception. The Arms Tech demonstration proceeded as expected that afternoon. Their prototype gun, a hybrid design incorporating elements of the modified system alongside proprietary components, performed adequately against standard targets, but truly shone when engaging their special armor samples. Against these, the standard penetrators failed completely, while Arms Tech's proprietary rounds succeeded. Colonel Chambers delivered a polished narrative throughout, emphasizing the supposed advanced nature of the test armor and the implications for future battlefield encounters. The congressional representatives appeared impressed, particularly Davis, who asked several leading questions highlighting the apparent superiority of the Arms Tech approach. Then came the counter-demonstration. Steele took the lead, beginning with a direct challenge. Distinguished representatives, what you've witnessed today was not a valid comparison of competing systems, but a carefully orchestrated deception. The so-called advanced Soviet armor used in the previous demonstration bears no resemblance to actual Soviet materials in composition or performance characteristics. Murmurs spread through the assembled officials. Chambers stood, objecting forcefully. That's an outrageous accusation, Captain. Our test materials are based on the latest intelligence regarding Soviet armor development. Then you won't object to a direct comparative test, Steele replied evenly, signaling for technicians to bring forward 2 armor plates. Before you are 2 samples, one actual captured T-72 frontal armor plate and one from Armstead's demonstration. We will fire identical penetrator rounds from our modified gun system at each. The test proceeded under careful observation. As predicted, the penetrator easily defeated the genuine Soviet armor while struggling against the Armstead special plate. Eleanor then presented the metallurgical analysis, highlighting the significant differences in composition and the specific elements added to the Armstead version that were absent from all known Soviet armor designs. In essence, she concluded, the Armstead demonstration used a target specifically designed to resist our penetrator technology while favoring their proprietary alternative. This does not represent a valid test of battlefield effectiveness against actual Soviet threats. Congressman Davis attempted to defend Armstead, suggesting the special plate represented potential future developments in Soviet armor technology. Whitmore countered by presenting the Army Materials Research Laboratory verification, emphasizing that no intelligence supported Armstead's speculative claims about future Soviet designs. The committee members exchanged troubled glances as the implications became clear. What had been presented as objective testing had been manipulated to favor one competitor at the expense of another, and potentially at the expense of American tank crews who would rely on these systems in combat. Whitmore took control of the proceedings. In light of these revelations, this committee will require additional time to evaluate all evidence before making recommendations regarding the XM1 program. Both parties will submit their complete test data for independent verification by Army Materials Research Laboratory. As the officials departed, Chambers approached Steele with barely contained fury. "You've made a serious mistake, Captain," he stated in a low voice. "Armstead has contracts throughout the defense sector and relationships with every major procurement office in the Pentagon. This won't be forgotten. Neither will attempting to rig demonstrations that affect the lives of American soldiers," Steele responded calmly. "We're not designing theoretical weapons, Colonel. We're developing systems that men will stake their lives on in combat. That reality deserves honest evaluation, not marketing tricks." Chambers departed without further comment, but his expression promised continued opposition by any means available. Harrison joined Steele, watching Chambers retreat toward the Armstead executives. "Well done, James. You handled that perfectly. Professional, factual, no unnecessary antagonism." "Will it be enough?" Steele asked. "I believe so," Harrison replied. "Whitmore tells me several committee members were deeply troubled by the attempted deception. The tide has shifted significantly in our favor." Eleanor approached with Martinez, both wearing cautious smiles. "The technical team is calculating penetration data from today's tests," she reported. "It confirms everything we've claimed about the modified system's effectiveness against actual Soviet armor." Martinez nodded in agreement. "That penetration against the T-72 plate was impressive as hell, sir. Any tanker seeing that would want it on their vehicle yesterday." "That's what matters," Steele affirmed. "Not winning bureaucratic battles or securing contracts, but giving our tank crews the best possible equipment." Harrison's expression turned reflective. "Your father would be proud, James, not just of the technical achievement, but of your perseverance in seeing it through despite the obstacles." Steele thought of his father's journal, the faded diagrams and notes that had inspired this journey. "History doesn't just repeat itself," he observed. "Sometimes it offers second chances." As they departed the test range, Steele felt cautiously optimistic. The political battle wasn't over. Armstead and Chambers would continue their efforts through other channels. But today had been a significant victory. The truth about the modified gun system's effectiveness had been demonstrated undeniably, witnessed by those with the authority to implement it across America's armed forces. For the first time since beginning this journey years earlier, Steele allowed himself to believe they might succeed where his father had been defeated. The forgotten cannon's legacy might yet save American lives on some future battlefield. But as Harrison had warned, the fight was far from over. Politics and profit motives remained powerful forces, and Chambers had made his continued opposition clear. The coming days would determine whether truth and practical effectiveness could truly prevail over entrenched interests and institutional resistance. Steele was prepared for that battle. Like any good tank commander, he had learned to fight on multiple fronts simultaneously: the technical, the tactical, and now the political. Each required different tactics, but the same unwavering commitment to the ultimate objective: protecting American soldiers through superior equipment. The Italian designers of the original Cannone dei 7532 could never have imagined their innovative solution would find new life decades later in American tanks. Yet here it was, their principles vindicated through modern implementation, their forgotten innovation potentially transforming armored warfare once more. History, Steele reflected, had a way of recognizing good ideas eventually, even if it sometimes required the right people to rediscover and champion them against the forces of bureaucratic inertia. His father had been ahead of his time. Now, perhaps, the time had finally arrived for his vision to be realized. Pentagon, Arlington, Virginia, 1972. The classified briefing room was silent as General Harrison concluded his presentation to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. On the projection screen behind him, performance data from the modified tank gun system displayed impressive statistics from both testing and NATO field exercises. "Gentlemen, the evidence is conclusive," Harrison stated firmly. "The modified gun system provides a 35% increase in effective range and penetration capability at 1/5 the development cost of competing approaches. It can be implemented across our existing tank fleet within 18 months, significantly enhancing our capabilities against Soviet armor threats." The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Maxwell Richards, studied the data thoughtfully. "The Congressional Appropriations Committee has already approved funding for this approach." "Yes, sir," Harrison confirmed. Following the Aberdeen demonstrations and subsequent verification testing, the committee voted overwhelmingly to support the modified gun program while continuing development of the XM-1 tank incorporating the same gun technology. Richards nodded, looking around the table at his fellow service chiefs. "Any objections or concerns?" The Marine Corps Commandant spoke up. "My only question is whether this system can be adapted to our vehicles as well. The performance characteristics would be valuable for our armor units." "Absolutely," Harrison assured him. "The modular design allows for integration with multiple platforms. We've already begun preliminary work on adapting it to the Marine Corps' requirements." With no further questions, Richards rendered his decision. The Joint Chiefs endorsed the modified gun program and recommend immediate implementation across eligible armor platforms. "General Harrison, please convey our congratulations to your team on an impressive achievement." As the meeting concluded, Harrison found Steele waiting in the anteroom outside. The captain had been promoted to major earlier that month, recognition of his contributions to the program and his effectiveness in navigating the political challenges it had faced. "It's official," Harrison announced. "Joint Chiefs endorsement, full implementation approved." Steele absorbed the news with characteristic composure, though the satisfaction in his eyes was evident. "That's the final hurdle." "Indeed," Harrison confirmed as they walked toward his office. "Production begins next month at the Lima Army Tank Plant. The first modified tanks will deploy to Europe by year's end." "And Chambers?" Steele inquired. "Reassigned to the Logistics Command in Fort Lee," Harrison replied with a hint of satisfaction. Armstech's contract for the XM-1 development was limited to specific subsystems rather than the primary weapons package they sought. They'll still profit, but not to the degree they anticipated. In Harrison's office, Eleanor Morgan waited with a bottle of champagne and 3 glasses. Her normally professional demeanor gave way to genuine celebration as she heard the news. "We did it," she said, pouring the champagne, "against all odds and opposition." "To the modified gun system," Harrison proposed as they raised their glasses, "and to the men whose vision made it possible, both past and present." Steele thought of his father, whose early work had planted the seeds for this achievement, and of the Italian designers whose innovative cannon had inspired it all, to learning from history instead of repeating it. After their brief celebration, Harrison turned to more practical matters. "James, I have new orders for you. The modified tanks deploying to Europe will need experienced leadership, someone who understands both the technology and its tactical applications. 3rd Armored Division has requested you specifically to command their 1st Battalion equipped with the new system." Steele considered the assignment. It meant returning to the field, away from the Pentagon's political battles, leading tank crews who would be the first to benefit from the improved capabilities. "I accept, sir. When do I depart?" "Next month," Harrison replied. "You'll oversee final preparation of the first production units before deploying with them to Germany." Eleanor's expression revealed mixed emotions, professional satisfaction at the program's success alongside personal disappointment at Steele's impending departure. "3rd Armored is getting the best possible commander for these tanks," she said, maintaining her professional composure. Harrison excused himself to take a call, leaving Steele and Eleanor momentarily alone. "I couldn't have done this without you," Steele told her. "Your technical expertise and determination were essential every step of the way." We make a good team, Eleanor acknowledged. The engineer and the tank commander, theory and practice working together. The best innovations usually emerge that way, Steele observed. Like the Italian cannon that started all this, brilliant engineering applied to practical battlefield needs. Eleanor smiled, history coming full circle. She hesitated, then continued more personally. I'll miss our collaboration, James. It's not ending, Steele assured her. The XM1 development continues, and field performance data from the modified tanks will inform that process. We'll still be working together, just from different locations. Their conversation was interrupted by Harrison's return. One last piece of business, the general announced. The Ordnance Museum at Aberdeen has requested permission to create an exhibit documenting the development of the modified gun system, including its historical precedents. He handed Steele a formal letter. They specifically asked if you would contribute your father's journal and notes for the display. They'll be preserved and protected, of course. Steele read the request, emotions conflicting. The journal was his most personal connection to his father, but sharing it would honor his father's work and ensure his contribution was recognized. I think he would have wanted that, Steele decided. His work helping to protect a new generation of American tank crews. There's more, Harrison continued. The museum curator discovered something remarkable in their archives. Original technical drawings of the Cannone de 7532, brought back from Italy after World War II. They were part of your father's original research materials, but became separated from his personal files. He produced a folder containing yellowed technical diagrams bearing Italian annotations and stamps. These appear to be the original designer's drawings, with hand calculations in the margins. The museum believes they may be the only surviving complete documentation of the original design. Steele opened the folder reverently. The detailed drawings, created decades earlier in a different war, revealed the innovative thinking that had inspired both his father's work and their current achievement. The Italian engineer's notes showed the same problem-solving approach, the same determination to increase performance despite limitations. Two generations of innovators, separated by time and circumstance, reaching similar solutions to universal challenges, Eleanor observed, looking over his shoulder at the drawings. And a third generation finally implementing what they envision, Steele added. The museum should definitely have these. People should know this story, how sometimes the best solutions come from understanding history rather than ignoring it. Harrison nodded approvingly. I thought you'd feel that way. The exhibit opens next month before your deployment. You should be there to see your father's work and the Italian designer's vision finally recognized. As they departed Harrison's office, Steele carried both the original Italian drawings and his father's journal, past and present, united in his hands. The battle to bring the modified gun system to America's tank forces had been long and difficult, fraught with political obstacles and institutional resistance. Yet they had prevailed, not through political maneuvering or corporate influence, but through the undeniable effectiveness of the technology itself. In the end, the gun's performance had spoken more eloquently than any lobbyist or promotional demonstration. American tank crews would soon have a system that dramatically improved their combat effectiveness and survivability against Soviet armor threats. Those crews would never know the bureaucratic battles fought to put that capability in their hands, nor would they recognize the historical precedents that made it possible. But they would benefit from the improved performance, and some would owe their lives to the innovative thinking of designers whose work spanned generations and continents. That, Steele reflected, was the true measure of success, not recognition or career advancement, but the practical impact on those who would rely on their work in the crucible of combat. The Italian designers of the original Cannone de 7532 had never seen their innovation reach its full potential during their war. His father had fought the same battle and suffered the same disappointment decades later. Now, through persistence and dedication, their shared vision would finally be realized. History, in its own time and way, had finally recognized the forgotten cannon. West Germany, 1973. Rain swept across the German countryside as the column of tanks moved into position along the defensive ridge. Major James Steele stood in the commander's cupola of his M60A1, observing the deployment through rain-speckled binoculars. Each tank in his battalion now sported the modified main gun with its distinctive longer barrel, a visible manifestation of the program he had fought so hard to implement. All units in position, sir, reported Captain Thomas Wilson, his operations officer. Steele acknowledged with a nod. Signal readiness to brigade. We'll commence the exercise on their mark. This was more than a routine NATO training operation. Representatives from every alliance member with armor forces were present to observe the modified tanks in action. After 6 months of deployment in Europe, the improved gun system had proven its worth in exercise after exercise, consistently outperforming both older American tanks and NATO allies' equipment. General Harrison had flown in from Washington specifically for this demonstration. Even now, he was in the observation post 2 kilometers back, alongside senior officers from Britain, Germany, France, and other alliance members. The performance of Steele's battalion today would influence NATO-wide adoption of the gun system, a strategic victory that would multiply its impact across Allied forces. Red for elements detected moving through Sector Charlie, Wilson reported, relaying information from forward observers. Estimated 2 companies of simulated T-72s advancing in tactical formation. Right where we expected them, Steele noted with satisfaction. The opposition forces playing the role of Soviet attackers were following standard Warsaw Pact doctrine, advancing along the most favorable terrain for armored vehicles. All tanks, this is Iron 6, Steele transmitted to his battalion. Red for advancing in Sector Charlie, maintain concealment. Hold fire until they reach Phase Line Bravo. Phase Line Bravo lay 2,500 meters ahead, well beyond the effective range of standard NATO tank guns, but comfortably within the capability of the modified system. The plan was to demonstrate decisive engagement at extended ranges, showcasing the tactical advantage the new guns provided. Through his binoculars, Steele observed the OPFOR tanks emerging from a tree line, advancing confidently across the open ground. Their commanders, operating under simulation parameters for standard NATO capabilities, believed they were still safely beyond effective engagement range. Red for crossing Phase Line Bravo, Wilson announced. All tanks weapons free, Steele ordered. Fire when ready. 36 modified M60A1 tanks fired in coordinated volleys. Downrange exercise controllers raised flag signals on the OPFOR vehicles, indicating kill after kill. Within minutes, the simulated Soviet attack had been neutralized before closing to what would have been their preferred engagement range. The radio crackled with General Harrison's voice. Impressive work, Major. The NATO observers are quite taken with the demonstration. Thank you, sir. Just following established doctrine with improved tools. Exactly the point we've been making, Harrison replied with satisfaction audible even through the radio static. I've just been informed that the German defense minister has requested immediate discussions about licensing the technology for their Leopard tanks. The implications were significant. NATO-wide adoption would create a unified armor capability that would fundamentally alter Warsaw Pact calculations about potential conflict in Central Europe. After the exercise concluded, Steele joined Harrison and the NATO delegation at the field headquarters. The atmosphere was positive, with senior officers examining performance data and discussing implementation possibilities. The British are particularly interested, Harrison informed Steele quietly. Their chieftain replacement program might incorporate our gun system rather than developing something new. Brigadier Harrington, the senior British observer, approached them. Major Steele, a most effective demonstration. Your gunners achieve remarkable accuracy at ranges our current systems simply cannot match reliably. Thank you, sir. They're excellent crews working with equipment that maximizes their capabilities. Indeed. Harrington nodded thoughtfully. Tell me, this system was based on historical principles, was it not? Something about an Italian design from the last war? The Cannonade 7532, Steele confirmed. An innovative gun that never reached its potential during World War II due to production delays. We adapted its progressive recoil system and breech design using modern materials and manufacturing techniques. Fascinating. Harrington seemed genuinely intrigued. Learning from history rather than repeating it. Rare wisdom in military procurement circles, I must say. As the NATO observers departed for their next appointment, Harrison drew Steele aside. Washington is very pleased with these developments. The program has exceeded all expectations, both technically and in terms of international cooperation. The crews deserve the credit, sir. They've embraced the new system and maximized its potential. Harrison studied Steele with an evaluating gaze. Your modesty is admirable, James, but misplaced in this instance. This program exists because of your persistence. Many others would have surrendered to the bureaucratic resistance years ago. Steele accepted the compliment with a slight nod. Any news on the XM1 development? Moving forward on schedule, the prototype incorporates all the lessons from our modified gun program, with further improvements in fire control and ammunition design. Harrison paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. Which brings me to the real reason for my visit. I'm not just here for the NATO demonstration. Sir? The Army is establishing a new office to oversee the final development and initial production of the XM1. They need a director with both technical expertise and practical field experience with the gun system. Harrison met Steele's gaze directly. I've recommended you for the position, James. Colonel's Eagles would come with it. The offer was unexpected. Steele had been anticipating at least another year commanding his tank battalion in Germany before rotation back to the States. What about my command here, sir? Your executive officer is ready for battalion command. You've trained him well. Harrison smiled slightly. This is the next logical step, James. You've proven the gun system works in the field. Now you can ensure it's properly integrated into the next generation of American tanks. Steele considered the opportunity. Commanding a tank battalion in Europe had been deeply satisfying, returning to his roots as a field officer after years of Pentagon politics. Yet Harrison's offer represented the chance to complete what he had started, to ensure that the lessons learned weren't lost in the development of the XM1. When would this take effect, sir? Immediately. Your orders are already cut, contingent on your acceptance. Steele made his decision. I accept, sir. Thank you for your confidence. Harrison clapped him on the shoulder. You've earned it, James. Your father would be proud of what you've accomplished and what you're about to ensure for the next generation of American tank forces. Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, 1973. The XM1 prototype sat on the test range, its angular hull and advanced features representing the future of American armored warfare. Colonel James Steele circled the vehicle slowly, examining every detail with the practiced eye of both a tank commander and a weapons development officer. The main gun was immediately recognizable, a further evolution of the modified system now deployed throughout Europe, with additional refinements to the breech mechanism and recoil system. The turret had been specifically designed around the gun's characteristics, optimizing its performance rather than adapting it to existing constraints. Eleanor Morgan stood nearby, clipboard in hand, watching Steele's evaluation with barely concealed anticipation. Your thoughts, Colonel? She asked finally. It's everything we envisioned, Steele replied, genuine appreciation in his voice. The gun system integrated perfectly with the new platform. The whole design complements its capabilities rather than constraining them. Eleanor smiled, pleased with his assessment. The composite armor represents a significant advancement as well. Early testing suggests protection levels far beyond any current Soviet capability. And the power plant? Turbine engine. Controversial choice, but it offers better power-to-weight ratio than conventional diesels. Fuel consumption is higher, but the performance benefits are substantial. Steele nodded thoughtfully. As director of the XM1 program office, these were the trade-offs he would need to evaluate and defend, balancing performance, protection, mobility, and logistical considerations. When can we begin field trials, he asked. First prototype is ready now, Eleanor confirmed. We've scheduled initial mobility testing for next week, followed by firing trials the week after. They moved inside the development facility, where engineers and technicians worked on various subsystems and components. The atmosphere was one of focused energy, a team unified by clear purpose and direction. The gun system's success has created remarkable momentum for the entire program, Eleanor observed as they entered her office. Congressional support is strong, funding is secure, and the technical path forward is clear. It's a far cry from where we were 3 years ago. Chambers and Armstead have gone quiet? Steele inquired, referring to their former adversaries. Mostly. Armstead secured contracts for some subsystems, electronics, and fire control components, but their attempt to control the entire program failed. Chambers has been reassigned to the Pentagon's Logistics Directorate, a comfortable position, but far from weapons development. Steele accepted the coffee Eleanor offered, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. From historical research to fielded capability to next-generation design. Quite the evolution. And one that wouldn't have happened without your persistence, Eleanor noted, settling behind her desk. Most officers would have abandoned the fight years ago. I had compelling motivation, Steele replied simply. Eleanor's expression softened with understanding. Your father's legacy. Speaking of which, have you seen the Ordnance Museum exhibit yet? They've completed the installation on the modified gun systems development. Not yet. I've been meaning to visit since returning from Germany. You should. They've done an excellent job tracing the lineage from the original Canone Day 7532 through your father's work to our current system. They even have one of the first production-modified guns on display alongside an original Italian cannon recovered from storage. Steele made a mental note to visit the exhibit soon. His father's journal and the original Italian technical drawings he had contributed had apparently become centerpieces of the display. Their discussion turned to the challenges ahead: production schedules, training programs for crews and maintenance personnel, integration with existing logistics systems. The XM1 represented not just a new tank, but a new approach to armored warfare, one that would require significant adaptation throughout the Army. As their meeting concluded, Eleanor hesitated, then spoke more personally. "It's good to have you back, James. The program needs your leadership, especially as we move into production." "It's good to be back," Steele admitted. "As much as I enjoyed field command, there's something satisfying about seeing this project through to completion." "Your father never got that opportunity," Eleanor observed gently. "No," Steele acknowledged. "His insights were buried in classified reports and forgotten. That's what drives me, ensuring this time the innovation reaches the soldiers who need it." The next weeks were filled with intensive testing of the XM1 prototype. Performance consistently exceeded specifications, particularly in firepower and protection. The gun system, now designated the M68A1, demonstrated exceptional accuracy and penetration capability against all simulated Soviet armor targets. Congressional oversight committees received regular briefings, with Steele and Eleanor presenting performance data and development milestones. The program had become a model of efficient military procurement, on schedule, within budget, and delivering capabilities that address clear operational requirements. Then came an unexpected development. During a routine staff meeting, Steele's aide delivered an urgent message. General Harrison requested his immediate presence at the Pentagon for a classified briefing. Steele arrived in Washington that afternoon, proceeding directly to Harrison's office. The general's expression was grave as he greeted him. "Thank you for coming so quickly, James. We've received concerning intelligence that requires immediate attention." Harrison activated security measures to prevent electronic eavesdropping, then spread satellite photographs across his desk. "These were taken 3 days ago at a Soviet testing facility near Kubinka. Analysis confirms they're testing a new tank design, designated T-80 according to our sources." Steele examined the images carefully. Even from aerial photography, the new Soviet design appeared significantly more advanced than the T-72 currently in service. "What do we know about its capabilities?" "Not enough," Harrison admitted. "But preliminary assessment suggests composite armor similar to what we're using in the XM1 and a new 125mm smoothbore gun that may outperform their current system substantially." The implications were concerning. If Soviet armor development had leaped forward, the modified gun system currently deployed throughout NATO might soon face threats beyond its design parameters. "How reliable is this intelligence?" Steele asked, studying the photographs more closely. "Reliable enough that the Secretary of Defense has requested an immediate assessment of our vulnerability and potential responses." Harrison's expression remained grave. "The modified gun system has been deployed across NATO for less than a year, James. If it's already approaching obsolescence against new Soviet designs," Steele understood the unspoken concern. The program's critics would seize on any suggestion that the modified system was inadequate against emerging threats, potentially undermining both current deployment and the XM1's development path. "We need more information before drawing conclusions," Steele stated firmly. "These photographs don't provide sufficient detail to assess the actual threat level." "Agreed," Harrison nodded, "which is why I'm sending you to London immediately. British intelligence has obtained technical documentation on the T-80's armor composition and gun specifications through sources in Eastern Europe. They've agreed to share the information with us, but only in a secure facility with appropriately cleared personnel." "When do I leave?" "Tonight. A military transport is standing by at Andrews. This is highest priority, James. The Secretary wants assessment and recommendations within 72 hours. As Steele departed for London, he reflected on the cyclical nature of armor development, the constant competition between protection and penetration that had defined tank warfare since its inception. If Soviet designers had indeed made a significant breakthrough, NATO's newly established advantage might be short-lived. Yet he also recognized the pattern from history. Every advance eventually prompted a countermeasure, which in turn spurred further innovation. The key was adaptability, designing systems that could evolve to meet emerging threats rather than requiring complete replacement. This was the philosophy that had guided the modified gun program from its inception, learning from historical precedent while incorporating flexibility for future development. The question now was whether that approach would prove sufficient against this new challenge. London, England, 1973. The secure facility beneath the British Ministry of Defense building was austere and functional. Steele sat at a metal table examining technical documents spread before him, while two British intelligence officers observed silently. What he read confirmed their worst fears. The T-80 represented a significant advance in Soviet armor design, with composite armor incorporating ceramic elements that provided protection far beyond previous generations. Most concerning was the new 125mm smoothbore gun, which preliminary calculations suggested would outrange and outperform NATO's standard tanks significantly. After hours of detailed analysis, Steele looked up at his British counterparts. These specifications are verified, as much as possible without physical examination of the vehicle, confirmed Colonel James Blackwood, head of British Technical Intelligence. Our source has proven reliable on previous Soviet weapon systems. Steele considered the implications carefully. The modified gun system currently deployed across NATO forces would be at a disadvantage against this tank, particularly at extended ranges. That appears to be the case, Blackwood agreed, though your XM1 with its improved version might fare better. The question is timeline, Steele mused. When will the T-80 enter production and deployment? Our best estimate is 18 to 24 months for initial operational capability, with full-scale deployment perhaps 3 to 4 years after that. This provided some breathing room, but not much. NATO had just completed upgrading thousands of tanks with the modified gun system, an investment that could not simply be discarded at the first sign of a new threat. I need to use your secure communications, Steele requested. I need to consult with our technical team at Aberdeen immediately. Within the hour, Steele was in a secure video conference with Eleanor Morgan and key engineers from the XM1 development team. He shared the Soviet specifications and outlined the potential challenge. The question isn't whether the T-80 represents an advance, Steele concluded. It clearly does. The question is how we respond. Can the current system be upgraded to counter this threat? Or do we need an entirely new approach? Eleanor considered the data thoughtfully. The fundamental design of our gun system remains sound, James. What's changed is the armor we need to defeat. That suggests our focus should be on improved ammunition rather than replacing the entire gun. One of the senior engineers nodded in agreement. The progressive recoil system and breech design give us headroom for higher pressures and velocities that we haven't fully exploited yet. With advanced penetrator materials and optimized projectile design, we could substantially increase performance without major hardware changes. Development timeline? Steele asked. For improved ammunition, 6 to 9 months for testing, perhaps another 6 for initial production, Eleanor estimated. The beauty of focusing on ammunition is that it can be deployed to existing modified guns in the field without major retrofitting. This was the adaptability Steele had hoped for, the ability to evolve the system to meet emerging threats rather than starting over. Draft a development proposal immediately, he directed. I need to present options to the Secretary of Defense when I return to Washington. Before departing London, Steele met again with Colonel Blackwood to discuss NATO-wide implications. Your approach is sound, the British officer opined, after hearing Steele's ammunition-focused strategy. Revolutionary changes in armor and weaponry are costly and time-consuming to implement. Evolutionary advances through improved ammunition would offer a more practical, near-term response. The original Italian designers understood this principle, Steele observed. They created a gun with performance margins beyond immediate requirements, allowing for future growth. We've followed the same philosophy with our modified system. Wisdom often transcends generations, Blackwood noted, particularly in military technology, where fundamental principles remain constant despite advancing capabilities. Returning to Washington, Steele briefed General Harrison and then the Secretary of Defense on the Soviet development and the proposed response. His presentation emphasized adaptation rather than replacement, leveraging the existing investment in the modified gun system while developing enhanced capabilities to counter the emerging threat. The T-80 represents a significant Soviet advance, Steele acknowledged to the assembled officials. But our response needn't be panic or abandonment of our current systems. The modified gun deployed throughout NATO forces has substantial growth potential, particularly through advanced ammunition development. The secretary seemed satisfied with this approach. Timeline for fielding this enhanced capability. Initial testing within 6 months. Production ready within 12. Full NATO implementation within 18, Steele estimated confidently, well before the T-80 reaches operational deployment in significant numbers. Authorization came quickly, with additional funding allocated specifically for the Enhanced Ammunition Development Program. Within days of returning to Aberdeen, Steele had established a dedicated team focused on meeting the accelerated timeline. Eleanor proved instrumental in coordinating the technical aspects, drawing on both theoretical materials science and practical ballistics expertise. The challenge energized the entire development community, with multiple approaches being explored simultaneously. It's remarkable how adversity focuses innovation, Eleanor observed during a late-night working session in her office. 3 weeks ago, we were congratulating ourselves on the successful deployment of the modified gun system. Now we're already developing its next evolution. That's the nature of the competition, Steele replied, studying performance projections for various penetrator designs. Every advantage is temporary. The key is adaptability, building systems that can evolve rather than requiring replacement. Like the original Canone da 7532, Eleanor noted with a smile, designed with performance margins that allowed for growth beyond immediate requirements. Exactly, Steele agreed. Those Italian engineers understood something timeless about weapons development, designed for the future, not just the present. The development program proceeded with remarkable efficiency, benefiting from the unified purpose and clear direction Steele provided. By the 4-month mark, prototype ammunition was already in testing, showing promising results against simulated T-80 armor samples constructed based on the intelligence specifications. Then came an unexpected breakthrough. One of the materials scientists on Eleanor's team developed a new penetrator composition that significantly outperformed existing designs against composite armor. Initial testing suggested it could defeat the T-80's frontal armor at ranges up to 2,500 meters, restoring the advantage the modified gun system had originally provided against older Soviet tanks. Steele observed the test firing personally, watching as the new round penetrated layers of advanced composite armor with devastating effectiveness. The results exceeded even the most optimistic projections. This changes everything, Eleanor stated, reviewing the test data. With this performance, our current gun system remains viable against projected Soviet developments for at least another decade. Assuming they don't make similar advances in ammunition design, Steele cautioned. Always the tactician, Eleanor smiled. But you're right, of course. This isn't the end of the competition, just the next phase. The Enhanced Ammunition Program's success reverberated throughout the defense establishment. Congressional oversight committees received briefings highlighting the cost-effectiveness of ammunition development compared to wholesale weapons replacement, a point that resonated strongly with budget-conscious legislators. NATO allies expressed immediate interest in the new ammunition, seeing it as an efficient way to maintain the effectiveness of their recently modified tanks without major new investments. The alliance-wide adoption that had characterized the gun modification program seemed likely to continue with its ammunition enhancement. As the program transitioned from development to production planning, Steele received an unexpected summons to the White House. The president had requested a briefing on the XM1 program and the response to Soviet armor developments. In the cabinet room, Steele presented the program's status to the President and National Security Council, emphasizing both the XM1's advanced capabilities and the ongoing enhancement of existing tank forces through the modified gun system and new ammunition. What impresses me most, Colonel, the President commented afterward, is not just the technical achievement, but the efficiency of the approach. You've found ways to maximize capability while minimizing cost and disruption. That's been our guiding principle throughout, Mr. President, Steele acknowledged, building on proven foundations rather than constantly starting anew. I understand there's an historical aspect to this program, the President noted. Something about an Italian gun design from World War II? Yes, sir. The Canone da 7532 provided the conceptual foundation for our modified gun system. Its innovative recoil management and breech design principles proved remarkably adaptable to modern requirements. The President seemed genuinely interested, learning from history rather than repeating it. Commendable, Colonel. I wish more of our defense programs showed similar wisdom. As Steele departed the White House, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. What had begun as historical research inspired by his father's work had evolved into a program that was transforming NATO's armored capabilities and shaping the future of American tank development. The original Italian designers of the Cannone dei 7532 could never have imagined their innovation would find new life decades later, influencing the balance of power between superpowers. His father, too, would have been amazed to see his early insights finally recognized and implemented on a global scale. Yet the common thread connecting these generations of innovators was clear: the recognition that good ideas transcend their immediate circumstances, that fundamental principles of weapons design remain relevant despite advancing technology, and that learning from the past often illuminates the path forward. Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, 1974. The Ordnance Museum's new wing was filled with distinguished guests for its formal opening ceremony. Military officials, defense industry executives, congressional representatives, and international delegations gathered for the unveiling of the exhibit, chronicling the development of the modified gun system from its historical roots to its current deployment. Steele stood near the entrance, watching as visitors moved through the carefully designed displays. The centerpiece was a striking juxtaposition: an original Cannone da 7532 recovered from storage in Italy, positioned beside one of the first production models of the modified gun system now deployed throughout NATO. Nearby, illuminated displays featured his father's journal and the original Italian technical drawings, along with photographs tracing the development process from concept to field deployment. Video monitors showed footage of the system in action during NATO exercises, demonstrating its superior performance. General Harrison, recently promoted to Army Chief of Staff, approached Steele with a satisfied expression. Quite the tribute, James, not just to the technology, but to the perseverance required to bring it to fruition. It's important that people understand the lineage, Steele replied. How innovation builds on what came before, often rediscovering wisdom that was overlooked or forgotten. Speaking of which, Harrison gestured toward the museum entrance. There's someone here you should meet. Steele turned to see Eleanor approaching with an elderly man who walked with the assistance of a cane. Despite his apparent frailty, the man carried himself with dignity, his eyes sharp and observant. Colonel Steele, Eleanor began, may I introduce Professor Alessandro Bellini? Professor Bellini was a junior engineer at Ansaldo in 1937, where he worked on the original Cannone dei 7532 design team. Steele's surprise was complete. Professor Bellini, this is an unexpected honor. The elderly Italian smiled, extending his hand. The honor is mine, Colonel. To see our work remembered and its principles vindicated after all these years, it is more than I ever expected. They moved together through the exhibit, Bellini providing insights and anecdotes about the original design process that had never been documented. We faced many of the same challenges you encountered, he explained, examining the technical displays. Institutional resistance, political considerations that overrode technical merit, production priorities that favored quantity over quality. The same patterns repeat themselves across generations, Steele observed. Indeed, Bellini agreed, but occasionally someone recognizes the value in what was overlooked and gives it new life. Your father attempted this, I understand, and now you have succeeded where he could not. They paused before a display featuring Major Richard Steele's journal and photographs from his post-war evaluation of captured Axis equipment. He would have been proud, Bellini said quietly, not just of the technical achievement, but of your persistence in seeing it through despite the obstacles. The museum director approached, informing them that the formal ceremony was about to begin. As they moved toward the central gathering area, Eleanor touched Steele's arm lightly. There's something else you should see before the ceremony, she said, guiding him and Bellini to a previously curtained display at the exhibit's end. The curtain had been drawn back to reveal a bronze plaque mounted beside photographs of three men: the original Italian designer of the Cannone da 7532, Major Richard Steele, and Colonel James Steele himself. The plaque read, "The Forgotten Cannon, a legacy of innovation across generations," commemorating the vision of those who recognize that advancement often comes not from rejecting the past, but from understanding its lessons. From the Cannone da 7532's original design in 1937 through Major Richard Steele's post-war evaluation to Colonel James Steele's successful implementation, this exhibit honors the persistence required to transform innovative ideas into battlefield reality. The museum board approved it unanimously, Eleanor explained. They felt the human story behind the technology deserved recognition. Steele stood silent, deeply moved by this unexpected tribute to his father and their shared journey. Professor Bellini placed a gnarled hand on his shoulder. 3 generations, the elderly engineer observed, each building on what came before, each facing similar resistance, but finally achieving what we all sought, a capability that protects those who serve. The formal ceremony began with the remarks from General Harrison, who outlined the strategic impact of the modified gun system on NATO's defensive posture in Europe. A congressional representative spoke of the program's efficiency as a model for future defense procurement. The NATO liaison highlighted the unprecedented alliance-wide adoption of the technology. Then, to Steele's surprise, Harrison invited him to the podium. He had not been scheduled to speak and had prepared no remarks. Yet as he faced the assembled guests, the words came naturally. What we celebrate today is not merely a weapon system, but a philosophy of innovation that transcends generations and borders. The modified gun program succeeded not because it pursued the most complex or expensive solution, but because it recognized enduring principles and applied them with modern technology. Steele gestured toward the displays. The Italian engineers who designed the original Cannone dei 7532 in 1937 could not have imagined their work would influence NATO's defenses decades later. My father, evaluating captured equipment after World War II, could not have known his insights would eventually protect a new generation of American tank crews. Yet their work endured because sound principles remain relevant despite advancing technology. He acknowledged Professor Bellini with a respectful nod. We are fortunate to have with us today one of the original Italian designers whose innovation we have built upon. His presence reminds us that technical wisdom often transcends its immediate circumstances, waiting for the right moment to fulfill its potential. Steele concluded with a personal reflection. My father once told me that good ideas never truly die. They simply wait for the right conditions to flourish. The modified gun program vindicated that belief. It has taught us that sometimes the path forward is illuminated by understanding the past, that innovation isn't always about rejecting what came before, but building upon its foundations. The applause was sustained and genuine. As Steele returned to his place, Professor Bellini clasped his hand firmly. You have honored our work beyond any recognition we received in our time, the elderly engineer said, emotion evident in his voice. More importantly, you have ensured it serves its intended purpose, protecting those who defend freedom. After the ceremony, as guests explored the exhibit in detail, Steele found himself approached by a familiar figure, Colonel Chambers, his former adversary from the program's contentious early days. Impressive exhibit, Colonel Steele, Chambers acknowledged, his manner subdued compared to their previous encounters. Congratulations on the program's success. Thank you, Colonel, Steele replied, somewhat surprised by the gesture. Chambers hesitated, then continued more personally. I was wrong about the modified gun approach. The results speak for themselves, better capability delivered faster and at lower cost than alternatives. He glanced around at the crowded exhibit. It's not easy to admit miscalculation, but history has rendered its verdict clearly enough. The acknowledgement was unexpected but welcomed. We all serve the same ultimate purpose, Colonel, ensuring American forces have the best possible equipment. Indeed, Chambers agreed, though we sometimes differ on the best path to that objective. As Chambers moved away, Eleanor joined Steele, having observed the exchange. That was unexpected, she noted. Success tends to resolve old conflicts, Steele observed. The program's results are difficult to argue against now. They walked together through the exhibit as the event concluded, pausing before the display of his father's journal. What would he have thought of all this? Eleanor wondered. He would have been pleased to see the principles finally implemented, Steele replied. But more importantly, he would have appreciated that the ultimate beneficiaries are the tank crews whose lives depend on having the best possible equipment. The cycle continues, Eleanor noted. The XM1 program is incorporating everything we've learned, while the enhanced ammunition development ensures our current tanks remain effective against emerging threats. Different generations of equipment evolving simultaneously, each building on what came before. That's how progress should work, Steele agreed. Not through revolution that discards past wisdom, but evolution that builds upon it. As they prepared to leave, Professor Bellini approached one final time, accompanied by the museum director. Colonel Steele, I have something for you, the elderly Italian said, presenting a small leather case. A personal memento I've kept for many years. Inside was a brass scale model of the Cannone dei 7532, exquisitely detailed and mounted on a wooden base bearing the original design team's signatures. This was presented to each member of the design team when the project was approved in 1937, Bellini explained. before politics and production problems intervened. I want you to have it, a tangible connection between our work and yours. Steele accepted the gift with profound appreciation. I'll treasure this, Professor, and ensure it eventually returns to the museum to complete the exhibit. As it should, Bellini agreed. Our work belongs to history now, and to the future it continues to influence. That evening, Steele stood alone in his office at the XM1 program headquarters. The brass model of the Italian cannon on his desk beside a model of the Abrams tank, now entering final development. The juxtaposition embodied the journey he had undertaken, from historical research to revolutionary capability, from forgotten innovation to battlefield reality. On the wall hung a framed photograph taken earlier that day, himself standing between General Harrison and Professor Bellini, 3 generations of military innovation connected by a single thread of insight and persistence. His father's journal lay open on the desk, the faded handwriting a testament to insights recognized too late in one era but vindicated in another. Beside it sat the technical specifications for the enhanced ammunition now entering production, the latest evolution of a capability that had transformed NATO's defensive posture. Steele reflected on the words he had spoken at the ceremony. Good ideas never truly die. They simply wait for the right conditions to flourish. His father had understood this truth, recognizing value in the forgotten Italian cannon when others saw only obsolete equipment. Now that vision had been fulfilled beyond what either his father or the original Italian designers could have imagined. The telephone interrupted his reflections. General Harrison's voice came through with characteristic directness. James, I've just come from a meeting with the Secretary of Defense. The first production models of the XM1 will be rolling off the assembly line in Lima next month. He wants you there personally to oversee final acceptance testing. Of course, sir. I'll make arrangements immediately. There's more, Harrison continued. The Secretary has decided that the official designation of the new tank will be M1 Abrams, named after General Creighton Abrams. But he's also approved a special acknowledgement in the technical documentation. Sir? The main gun system will be officially designated as the M68A1 Steele in recognition of both your father's early work and your development of the modified system. It's unprecedented to name a weapon system component after an individual, but the Secretary felt it appropriate given the unique circumstances. Steele was momentarily speechless, the honor unexpected and deeply meaningful. Thank you, sir. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, James. The results speak for themselves. Harrison paused briefly. Your father would be proud, not just of the recognition, but of what it represents. Vision vindicated, persistence rewarded, and American tank crews better protected because of it. After the call concluded, Steele returned to the window, gazing out at the Aberdeen testing grounds where both the modified gun system and the XM1 had proven their capabilities. The journey had come full circle, from studying historical precedents to creating systems that would themselves become part of history. The Italian designers of the original Cannone dei 7532 had never seen their innovation reach its potential during their war. His father had fought the same battle and suffered the same disappointment decades later. Now, through persistence and dedication, their shared vision had not only been realized, but had transcended its origins to shape the future of armored warfare. The forgotten cannon had found its place in history, and its legacy would protect American soldiers for generations to come. For James Steele, no recognition could be more meaningful than that enduring impact, the true measure of innovation vindicated. Arlington National Cemetery, 2005. Colonel James Steele, now retired at 65, stood before his father's grave, the morning sun warming the white marble headstone. Beside him, Michael Reeves, the military journalist who had sought him out for an interview about the development of the Abrams tank, waited respectfully. So that's the story, Steele concluded, placing a small brass model of the Cannone dei 7532 at the base of the headstone. How a forgotten Italian cannon from World War II ultimately transformed American armor and saved countless lives in conflicts from Desert Storm to Iraq. It's remarkable, Reeves acknowledged. 3 generations connected by a single thread of innovation. The Italian designers, your father, and you. 4 generations now, Steele corrected. The gun system's principles continue to influence new developments. My son-in-law is currently working on the M1A3 upgrade program. The legacy continues. They walked slowly through the cemetery, passing the graves of soldiers from multiple generations of American conflicts. You mentioned earlier that Captain Dawson's tank was destroyed in Vietnam because its gun couldn't engage enemy armor at sufficient range, Reeves noted. Did that experience directly influence your determination to improve American tank guns? It crystallized what was already a professional concern, Steele confirmed. When you lose good men because your equipment is outperformed by the enemy's, it creates a particular kind of responsibility. You either accept the limitations or you fight to overcome them. And the M1 Abrams has never lost a tank-to-tank engagement in combat, Reeves observed. Not one, Steele nodded with quiet satisfaction. In Desert Storm, they were engaging Iraqi tanks at ranges the Iraqis couldn't even return fire effectively. The same principles that made the modified gun system effective in the 1970s made the Abrams dominant in the 1990s and beyond. They approached another section of the cemetery, where more recent graves marked losses from Iraq and Afghanistan. Steele paused, observing the fresh flowers on several markers. The true measure of our work isn't in the technology itself, he said softly. It's in the lives protected and the soldiers who return home because their equipment gave them every possible advantage. At the cemetery's edge, a group of veterans had gathered for another memorial service. Among them, Steele recognized the distinctive black tanker's beret of the armored forces. Tank crews form a special brotherhood, he observed. From World War II through today's conflicts, the fundamental experience remains the same. Warriors encased in steel, facing the enemy's best weapons, dependent on their equipment and each other for survival. As they departed Arlington, Reeves had one final question. Of all your achievements, the modified gun program, the XM1 development, the enhanced ammunition, what do you consider most significant? Steele considered this thoughtfully. Not any technical specification or performance metric. What matters most is that we learn from history instead of repeating it. We recognize value in forgotten innovations and gave them new life. We built on foundations laid by previous generations rather than discarding their wisdom. He gazed back towards the cemetery's rolling hills. In doing so, we honored our obligation to those who serve, ensuring they have the best possible equipment developed with their survival as the primary consideration. A powerful legacy, Reeves acknowledged. The only one that truly matters, Steele replied. Machines become obsolete, weapons are eventually replaced, but the commitment to protecting those who defend our nation, that endures across generations. At the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, their final stop before concluding the interview, a special exhibition on American armor development featured the evolution from World War II through modern designs. Central to the display was a section dedicated to the M1 Abrams and its predecessors. There, mounted side by side, were cutaway models of the original Canone de 7532, the modified gun system of the 1970s, and the current M256 gun of the Abrams, 3 generations of innovation connected by common principles and purpose. Beneath them, a simple plaque summarized what Colonel James Iron Steele considered his true legacy. Innovation honors the past by building upon its wisdom. Progress comes not from rejecting history, but from recognizing its enduring lessons. The soldiers whose lives depend on these weapons deserve nothing less than our fullest commitment to this principle. As elderly veterans gathered around the display, some who had served in Patton tanks in Vietnam, others who had commanded Abrams tanks in Desert Storm, Steele observed their reactions with quiet satisfaction. Few would ever know the full story of the forgotten cannon that had influenced their equipment and protected their lives. But that was the nature of true service, impact that extended far beyond recognition or acclaim. The legacy that mattered wasn't recorded on plaques or in history books, but in the soldiers who returned home safely because someone had refused to accept limitations, had learned from the past to secure the future, and had put their protection above all other considerations. That was the legacy of Steele that would endure long after the tanks themselves had become museum pieces. The unwavering commitment to those who served, expressed through innovation that transcended generations.